Welcome to Calming Bedtime Journeys channel. Tonight we step away from comfortable modern bedrooms and climb into a place where sleep was never guaranteed. Have you ever wondered how people rested when their job required them to watch for danger through the darkness? Or how anyone managed to fall asleep inside a cold stone tower while an entire medieval city depended upon their vigilance? Imagine a skyline of steep rooftops and smoking chimneys beneath a moonlit sky. Somewhere above those crowded streets stands a guard tower. A small lantern glows behind a narrow opening. Inside, a tired watchman rubs his eyes and prepares for another long night. The tower is sturdy, the city walls are strong, yet comfort remains a very different matter. Tonight, you'll spend the night alongside the men tasked with protecting medieval towns after sunset. You will climb their stairs, share their cramped quarters, listen to the sounds of sleeping streets, and discover how rest and responsibility coexisted in one of the most unusual sleeping places in history. So, before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what your local time is. Now, dim the lights and allow yourself to step through a city gate as evening settles over the medieval world. The day is ending. The market stalls have closed. Merchants are packing away goods beneath fading sunlight. The smell of baked bread drifts from nearby homes. Wood smoke hangs softly in the cool air. Somewhere a church bell marks the passing hour. You walk along a cobbled street worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The buildings lean slightly toward one another overhead, making the lane feel narrower than it truly is. Small windows glow with candlelight. Voices drift from taverns where workers gather before heading home. Above everything rises the guard tower. Its silhouette stands dark against the evening sky. You approach slowly. The tower is part of the city's defensive system, connected to walls that surround the settlement like a protective ring across medieval Europe. City walls served as vital barriers against raids, bandit attacks, and rival armies. Towers were positioned at intervals along those walls, allowing guards to observe both the countryside beyond and the streets within. That much historians know with confidence. The exact sleeping arrangements inside many towers, however, remain harder to reconstruct. Records survive unevenly. Some towers left detailed accounts, others left almost nothing at all. As you draw closer, the tower appears even larger. Stone blocks form thick walls that have endured countless winters. Tiny windows pierce the masonry like narrow slits. Their size is no accident. Smaller openings make excellent defensive features, though they provide rather disappointing view when someone simply wants fresh air. You reach a heavy wooden door. Its iron fittings catch the last traces of sunlight. Inside, the atmosphere changes immediately. The sounds of the city become softer. The smell of damp stone replaces the sense of cooking and livestock. Your footsteps echo faintly against the walls. A guard nods as you enter. He has been awake since before dawn. His wool clothing carries traces of smoke and sweat. His boots show signs of long service. Nothing about him suggests luxury. Medieval city guards occupied an important position, yet few enjoyed lives of particular comfort. You begin climbing. The staircase curls upward inside the tower wall, step after step. Round and round, the air grows cooler as you ascend. A faint draft brushes your face through narrow openings somewhere above. Another guard moves across a wooden floor. The sound echoes downward through the stone shaft. The climb feels endless. There is a reason for that. Medieval towers often emphasize defense over convenience. Stairs could be narrow, steep, and exhausting. Carrying supplies upward demanded effort. Carrying armor demanded even more. Carrying yourself after a sleepless night was probably the greatest challenge of all. You finally emerge into one of the upper levels. The room is surprisingly small. Wooden beams support the ceiling, A lantern flickers near the wall. Several stools sit beside a rough table. A rack holds spears and other equipment. Nothing appears decorative. Everything serves a purpose. The stone walls release a faint, earthy smell. Touching them reveals a cool surface polished by age. The room feels secure, but hardly cozy, and yet this is where people live portions of their lives. Many guards spent long hours inside towers during their assigned watches, depending on local arrangements. Some remained there overnight. Others rotated through shifts that allowed periods of rest between duties. You move toward a narrow opening overlooking the city. The view is remarkable below. Rooftops stretch across the darkness like uneven waves. Chimneys release thin trails of smoke. Lanterns glow near important streets. Beyond the walls lies open countryside fading into shadow. For a moment you understand why towers mattered. Danger rarely announces itself politely. A watchman stationed high above the city could detect approaching travelers, suspicious movement, fires, or military threats far sooner than people below. That responsibility shaped every aspect of tower life, including sleep, because sleep here was never entirely separate from duty. A curious detail survives from some medieval accounts. Certain guards were fined if they were caught sleeping when they should have been watching. This might sound obvious, but the repeated appearance of such rules suggests authorities worried about the problem constantly. After all, guards were human. Humans become tired, very tired, especially after standing in cold weather for hours. One amusing historical tidbit involves complaints about watchmen who sought creative ways to appear awake. Some reports describe guards leaning on walls, sitting in sheltered corners, or finding positions that allowed brief moments of rest without technically abandoning their posts. Whether these methods fooled anyone remains open to debate. You suspect they fooled very few people. Night deepens outside. The city grows quieter. A dog barks somewhere below. Then silence returns. A faint breeze enters through the opening beside you. It carries traces of smoke, damp earth, and distant cooking fires now fading into memory. The guard near the lantern stretches carefully. His shift will continue for hours. Soon another man will arrive to replace him. Then another after that. Throughout the night, the tower will remain occupied. Sleep will come in fragments, squeezed between responsibilities and interrupted by schedules that rarely respected comfort. Some researchers continue debating whether certain city guards slept regularly within towers or used nearby guardhouses more often. Practices varied enormously between regions and centuries. Medieval Europe was never one uniform experience. Still, towers remained workplaces where tired men spent long nights. And tonight, you remain among them. The lantern flame flickers, the stone walls seem almost golden in its light. Beyond the narrow opening, stars emerge above the sleeping city. The night is only beginning. The lantern continues its gentle dance against the stone walls. You remain inside the tower while darkness settles fully across the city below. The guard near the window shifts his weight and glances outward once more before another watchman arrives to take his place. Their exchange is brief, a few quiet words, a nod, then duty changes hands. The rhythm feels practiced. You begin to understand that tower life revolves around repetition. The same stairs, the same walls, the same route between sleeping space and observation posts day after day, night after night. The newly arrived watchman gestures toward the staircase. You follow him upward. The steps narrow as the tower rises. The stone beneath your boots has been worn smooth by generations of feet. In some places, shallow grooves mark centuries of constant use. Thousands upon thousands of climbs have shaped these stairs into something almost organic. The air changes as you ascend, cooler now, sharper. A faint draft slips through tiny openings in the masonry. It brushes your face with surprising force. Medieval builders understood the value of ventilation. Although the men climbing these stairs during winter may have held rather different opinions, a few more turns bring you to another landing. You pause for a moment. Your legs are beginning to feel the effort. That is hardly surprising. Many guard towers required frequent movement between levels. Supplies had to be carried upward. Messages traveled through the structure. Guards rotated through posts. Every task involved climbing. And there were no convenient shortcuts. No lifts. No mechanical assistance. Just stairs. Lots of stairs. A common historical reality of medieval towers is that spiral staircases often turned clockwise as they ascended. This arrangement generally favoured defenders during combat because most fighters were right-handed. A defender, moving key downward, could swing more freely than an attacker climbing upward. At least, that is the traditional explanation. Some scholars question whether every spiral staircase followed this military logic. Available evidence varies considerably between regions and building types. Practical construction concerns may have influenced designs just as much as defensive theory. Either way, your calves are currently less interested in architectural debates than in finding somewhere to sit. Eventually you reach a higher chamber. The room is smaller than the one below. A low wooden ceiling stretches overhead. A narrow window slit faces the countryside beyond the walls. Through it, moonlight enters as a pale silver line across the floor. The atmosphere feels quieter here, almost isolated. The city's sounds arrive only faintly now. A distant bark, a cartwheel somewhere far below. The occasional murmur of voices drifting upward through the night air. Most of the time, however, you hear only the tower itself. Wood creaks softly. Stone settles almost imperceptibly. The wind whispers around the outer walls. Ancient buildings have their own language. This room serves several purposes. It functions as an observation point, a temporary refuge from weather, and sometimes a resting area between duties. Space inside medieval towers was precious. Rooms rarely enjoyed the luxury of serving only one purpose. Efficiency ruled everything. Against one wall stands a simple bench, not an impressive bench, not a comfortable bench, just a sturdy wooden surface polished by years of use. You run your fingers across it. The wood feels cool and slightly rough. Tiny scratches cover the surface. Countless hands have rested here. Countless weary guards have probably sat in exactly this spot while trying not to fall asleep. Perhaps some failed. Human nature has remained remarkably consistent. The watchman beside you suppresses a yawn. His shift began before sunset. He still has hours remaining before rest becomes possible. Even then, sleep will not necessarily arrive immediately. A curious challenge of medieval guard life involved timing. Watches divided the night into segments, depending on local customs. Guards often worked rotating schedules that interrupted natural sleeping patterns. Imagine drifting into sleep only to be awakened for duty a short time later, then returning to rest, then waking again. Not exactly the recipe for perfect relaxation, yet many people throughout history accepted fragmented sleep as normal. In fact, some historians suggest that divided sleep patterns were common in parts of medieval society. According to this theory, people often experienced a first sleep and a second sleep separated by a period of wakefulness during the night. The idea remains actively discussed among researchers. Some evidence supports it strongly. Other historians caution against applying the concept too broadly across all places and periods. The medieval world rarely fits neat categories. You move toward another staircase. This one is even steeper. The steps seem determined to challenge every visitor personally. You go round another curve, then another. The tower narrows as it rises toward the highest levels. Stone walls close in around you. The lantern's glow stretches across the staircase in shifting patterns. For a moment, you imagine climbing these stairs during a storm. Rain outside, wind howling, armor weighing heavily on your shoulders. Suddenly, this quiet ascent feels much more impressive. A small platform appears ahead. You emerge into the upper watch level. The view steals your attention immediately. The city spreads beneath the stars like a dark tapestry. Roofs overlap in irregular patterns. Church towers rise above surrounding buildings. A few scattered lights still burn in windows where families remain awake. Beyond the walls lies open countryside, Fields, roads, dark forests in the distance. The horizon fades into shadow. A cool breeze touches your skin. It carries the scent of damp earth and distant vegetation. Compared with the smells of the city below, the air feels remarkably clean. The watchman scans the landscape carefully. This is his responsibility. From here, approaching travelers can be spotted long before reaching the gates. Fires become visible. Unusual movement attracts attention. A tower's height provides information. Information provides security. One unusual medieval anecdote describes guards using songs and conversations or spoken prayers to help stay awake during long night watches. Exact practices varied widely, but surviving references suggest that maintaining alertness required creativity. After all, staring into darkness for hours is challenging work, especially when everyone else seems asleep. You lean against the stone parapet. The surface feels cold beneath your hand. Moonlight paints soft silver patterns across the masonry. The wind rises briefly, then settles again. Far below, a bell rings somewhere within the city. One note, then silence. The sound lingers in the night. The watchman listens automatically. Years of habit, years of training, years of climbing stairs, very much like these. Historians continue debating exactly how much time guards spent resting within towers compared with nearby guardhouses or barracks. Practices changed from city to city. Wealthier towns often maintain different arrangements than smaller settlements. Yet one thing remains certain. For the men responsible for watching medieval cities after dark, towers became familiar companions. They knew every step, every creak, every draft. And before the night ends, you will know them as well. For now, however, you stand high above the sleeping streets, surrounded by the stone, moonlight, and the quiet labour of vigilance. The tower seems almost alive around you, patient, ancient, waiting for the long hours ahead. The wind brushes past the tower summit for a few moments before fading again. You remain beside the watchman, looking out across the sleeping city. Below, the rooftops seem peaceful, the streets appear empty, yet the tower exists because appearances can be deceiving. A city at rest still requires guardians. Eventually the watchman turns from the parapet and begins descending. His replacement will soon arrive. You follow him back through the narrow doorway and down the spiral staircase. The climb upward had felt long. The descent feels even longer. Perhaps it is the dim lantern light. Perhaps it is simple fatigue. You have not even spent a full night inside the tower, yet you already understand why guards knew every step by memory. In darkness, familiarity mattered. The staircase twists through the stone core like a giant corkscrew. Your hand slides along the wall for balance. The stone feels cool and slightly damp beneath your fingers. Below, a faint glow becomes visible. A lower chamber awaits. When you enter, the room immediately feels warmer than the upper levels. Not warm by modern standards, simply less cold. That distinction mattered greatly. The chamber serves as one of the practical centers of tower life. Equipment rests against walls. A small lantern hangs from a hook. Several wooden chests occupy one corner. Near the far side stands a simple sleeping area. This is what you came to see. The sleeping space is modest, very modest. A few straw mattresses lie along one wall. Several wool blankets have been folded neatly. A rough wooden bench stands nearby. The arrangement resembles a temporary shelter more than a proper bedroom. Yet for many guards, this represented an acceptable place to rest. Comfort occupied a lower position than readiness. You kneel beside one mattress. The straw filling creates an uneven surface beneath the fabric cover. Some areas feel thicker than others. Small lumps press upward unpredictably. Not exactly, just still. Straw remained one of the most common bedding materials throughout medieval Europe. It was relatively affordable and could be replaced when necessary. Wealthier households sometimes enjoyed feather mattresses, but ordinary guards rarely slept surrounded by such privileges. You press a hand against the bedding. It feels firm, a little scratchy. probably adequate after a long shift. One accepted historical fact is that medieval sleeping arrangements varied enormously according to wealth and occupation. While nobles might enjoy elaborate beds with curtains and soft furnishings, working people often relied upon simple mattresses stuffed with straw, hay, or other available materials. The tower reflects that reality perfectly. Nothing here exists for decoration. Things exist for function. The room carries a mixture of smells: dry straw, lantern oil, old wood, damp stone, a faint trace of smoke clinging to clothing and blankets. The combination is surprisingly comforting after a while. Human beings adapt quickly to familiar surroundings, even imperfect ones. Agard enters carrying a folded cloak. Without ceremony, he places it near one mattress and sits heavily on the bench. His boots scrape softly against the floor. He stretches his shoulders, then sighs, a very deep sigh. You recognize it immediately. It is the universal sound of someone who has worked long hours and desperately wants sleep. Some things never change. The guard removes a glove and rubs his eyes. Soon he will rest before another shift demands his attention. Until then, this humble room becomes his temporary refuge. The lantern flickers, shadows move gently across the walls. For a moment, the atmosphere feels almost peaceful. Yet historians continue discussing how consistently guards actually slept inside towers. In certain cities, dedicated barracks or nearby buildings provided sleeping accommodations. Elsewhere, towers themselves seem to have served directly as resting spaces. Surviving records do not always provide clear answers. The medieval world enjoyed making life difficult for future researchers. A quirky detail appears in some historical references to bedding maintenance. Straw mattresses occasionally required fresh filling because old straw compressed, collected dirt, or attracted unwelcome visitors with many legs. Not the sort of roommates most people would request. The guards likely shared that opinion. You notice that blankets remain especially important. The tower walls are thick, but thick stone creates unusual conditions. During cold seasons, masonry absorbs chill from the surrounding air. During warmer months, it can remain cool long after the sun rises. The result is a building that constantly interacts with temperature, sometimes helpfully, sometimes not. You pick up a folded wool blanket. It feels surprisingly heavy. The rough fibers scratch lightly against your skin. Medieval wool was durable and practical, though few people would have mistaken it for luxury fabric. Still, on a cold night, warmth mattered far more than softness. Outside, a breeze rattles faintly against the narrow window opening. The sound drifts through the room, soft, steady, sleepy. The guard on the bench begins removing his outer garments. Nearby equipment remains within easy reach. A spear rests against the wall. A helmet sits on a wooden chest. Nothing is stored very far away. This arrangement reflects an important reality. Rest was always temporary. At any moment, an alarm could touch. A messenger could arrive. A suspicious movement could be spotted from above. The guards needed the ability to transition quickly from sleeping to working. Imagine trying to achieve deep relaxation under those circumstances. Your sword nearby, your duties waiting, your sleep uncertain. Yet generations of guards managed exactly that. Human beings possess an impressive ability to rest whenever opportunity appears. The room grows quieter. Another watchman passes through briefly before continuing toward the stairs. His footsteps fade upward into the darkness. Then silence returns. Almost silence. You still hear the tower, a tiny creak from a beam, the rustle of wool, the whisper of air moving through stone passage, the occasional distant sound from the city below. Together they create a strange nighttime music. The guard finally stretches out upon the straw mattress. The bedding shifts beneath his weight. He pulls a blanket across his shoulders and closes his eyes. No dramatic ceremony, no elaborate routine, just exhaustion meeting opportunity. Many medieval workers likely approached sleep in much the same way. The luxury of perfect sleeping conditions rarely existed. People rested where circumstances allowed. They adapted to noise, discomfort, interruptions, and uncertainty. A number of scholars remain uncertain about how much personal space guards enjoyed within different towers. Some facilities appear to have been relatively crowded, others may have offered slightly more room. Surviving evidence varies from place to place. What seems clear is that privacy was limited, very limited. The idea of a personal bedroom would have felt unfamiliar to many working people of the period. Shared space was normal, shared sounds were normal, shared routines were normal. You sit quietly while the lantern burns lower. The sleeping guard breathes slowly now. Outside, clouds drift across the moon. The tower stands firm against the night. Within its walls, a few simple mattresses, rough blankets, and practical furnishings provide enough comfort for weary watchmen to recover between duties. Not luxury, not ease, just enough. And sometimes, in the medieval world, enough was all anyone could ask for. The sleeping guard remains motionless beneath his wool blanket. His steady breathing blends with the quiet sounds of the tower. The lantern glows softly nearby, casting warm circles of light across stone and timber. Outside, the city continues its long journey through the night. You sit quietly and study the room. Now that your eyes have adjusted, small details become easier to notice. The straw mattress occupies only part of the sleeping area. Along another wall stands a wooden bench wide enough for a tired person to stretch out. Nearby rests a folded cloak that might serve as extra bedding if needed. Nothing appears luxurious, yet every object represents an attempt to make rest possible. I begin to appreciate how important even simple comforts became in medieval towers. A blanket was not merely a blanket. A bench was not merely a bench. These items help transform a military structure into a place where exhausted people could recover, at least temporarily. The tower itself was never designed as a comfortable residence. Defense came first. Everything else followed afterward. Surviving municipal records from various medieval towns suggest that guards often received equipment and clothing as part of their duties. Exactly what was provided depended heavily on location, wealth, and local regulations. Some communities invested more heavily in their defences than others. Not every tower looked the same. Not every sleeping arrangement matched. Still, a common pattern emerges. Practicality ruled. You move closer to the bench. The wood feels hard beneath your hand. Years of use have polished parts of the surface until they shine faintly in the lantern light. It is easy to imagine a watchman choosing this spot for a brief nap between assignments. Perhaps he intended to rest for only a few minutes. Perhaps he slept much longer. Fatigue has a way of negotiating its own terms. The air inside the room remains cool. Stone walls absorb much of the warmth generated by human bodies and lantern flames. Even during periods of rest, guards rarely escape the physical realities of their environment. A slight draft touches your cheek. You glance upward, near the ceiling. A narrow opening allows air to circulate. Fresh air was valuable, though its benefits probably felt less impressive during winter storms. A curious detail appears in several medieval references to sleeping furniture. In some places, wooden beds incorporated ropes stretched beneath mattresses. These ropes supported the bedding and helped prevent sagging. Over time, however, ropes loosened. Owners occasionally needed to tighten them. One popular story claims this maintenance gave rise to the phrase sleep tight. The explanation is widely repeated today, although language experts remain unconvinced by the connection. The true origins of the phrase are less certain than many people assume. History occasionally enjoys teasing us. The sleeping guard shifts slightly. The straw rustles beneath him. Then stillness returns. You notice another mattress in the corner. This one appears unused tonight. Its blanket remains neatly folded. A wooden chest beside it likely contains personal belongings, spare clothing, or equipment. Privacy remains limited. Very limited. Yet people naturally create personal spaces whenever possible. Even a small corner of a shared room can become meaningful when it belongs to you. A few possessions, a familiar blanket, a preferred place to sleep. Small things matter. The tower's upper floors may appear harsh to modern eyes, but many medieval workers judged comfort differently. Expectations were shaped by experience. If much of your life involved hard labor, outdoor exposure, and uncertain conditions, a dry sleeping place behind thick walls might seem perfectly respectable, perhaps even desirable. Outside, clouds drift slowly across the moon. The light entering through the window slit brightens briefly before fading again. The changing illumination creates shifting patterns along the stone floor. The room almost feels alive. Wood expands and contracts quietly. The lantern flame bends with subtle air currents. The tower settles around you. A lesser-known aspect of medieval sleep concerns how frequently people shared sleeping spaces across many levels of society. Solitary bedrooms were uncommon. Families shared beds. Servants slept together. Travelers occupied crowded inns. Personal space was a luxury. Community was unavoidable. The tower follows that pattern. Several guards might rest in the same room depending on schedules and local arrangements. Conversations likely continued after shifts ended. Complaints about weather probably filled many evenings. Stories, jokes, and rumors almost certainly circulated through these chambers. Human nature travels remarkably well across centuries. You can easily imagine it. One guard describing an unusually difficult shift. Another grumbling about sore feet. Someone insisting tomorrow's weather will improve despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Every ear contains optimists. The smell of lantern oil grows slightly stronger as the flame burns lower. It mixes with wool, straw, and stone to create a scent unique to the tower. Not unpleasant, just distinctive. The documentary record becomes less certain when discussing exactly how much sleep individual guards received during different periods. Requirements varied enormously. Some towns maintained organized rotations, others depended on smaller numbers of personnel. Conditions changed according to circumstance. Peaceful nights differed from dangerous times. Prosperous cities differed from struggling ones. The medieval world rarely followed a single pattern. You walk toward the narrow window. The stone opening frames a small section of the city below. A few lights still glow in distant buildings. Somewhere, someone remains awake. Perhaps a baker preparing dough before dawn. Perhaps a merchant balancing account. Perhaps another guard stationed in a different tower. Life continues even during the deepest hours of night. A bell sounds faintly in the distance. Its tone drifts through the darkness before fading away. The sleeping watchman does not wake. Years of interrupted rest have likely taught him which sounds require attention and which can be ignored. Experienced guards developed remarkable abilities to sleep through ordinary noises while remaining alert to unusual ones. It is a useful skill. Parents would recognize it immediately. The room grows quieter still. The bench waits patiently beside the wall. The spare mattress remains untouched. Blankets rest in careful folds. The lantern continues its steady glow. Simple objects, simple comforts, yet together they reveal something important. People did not merely work inside medieval guard towers. They lived portions of their lives there. They ate, rested, complained, laughed, and recovered from exhaustion within these stone chambers. The tower was both workplace and temporary home. As the night deepens, you begin to understand that sleeping here involved more than finding a mattress. It meant adapting to noise, adapting to cold, adapting to shared spaces, adapting to duty, and perhaps most importantly, adapting to the knowledge that rest could end at any moment. For now, however, the tower remains peaceful. The guard sleeps, the city dreams below, and the long medieval night continues its quiet passage toward dawn. The tower remains quiet for a little while longer. The sleeping guard continues resting beneath his blanket while the lantern burns steadily beside the wall. Outside, darkness covers the city like a heavy cloak. Most residents are asleep. Bakers have not yet begun their earliest preparations. Market stalls remain empty. Even the taverns have largely fallen silent. Yet inside the tower, the night follows a different rhythm. Sleep never arrives as one long uninterrupted journey. Instead, It comes in pieces. A guard resting now may be awake again before long. Another watchman currently standing on the upper platform will eventually descend for his own period of rest. The tower breathes according to duty schedules rather than natural comfort. You soon witness the process firsthand. A faint sound echoes from the staircase. Footsteps, measured, unhurried. A watchman enters the chamber carrying a small lantern of his own. His face appears tired but alert. He exchanges a few quiet words with another guard seated nearby. Then he approaches the sleeping man. A gentle nudge, a few whispered words. Nothing dramatic. The sleeping guard opens his eyes almost immediately. For a moment he looks disoriented, then memory returns. Duty, always duty, and sits upright and rubs his face. The blanket slips from his shoulders. Cool air quickly replaces the warmth trapped beneath the wool. You can practically feel the discomfort. Few experiences are quite as unpleasant as leaving a warm blanket during the middle of the night. The medieval world understood this problem perfectly. The guard rises slowly and begins preparing for another watch. His rest period is over. A common feature of urban defense systems involved rotating watches throughout the night. Cities needed constant observation, especially around gates, walls, and vulnerable points. Maintaining alertness required shifts, although exact schedules differed from one location to another. The result was a pattern of interrupted sleep. Again and again, night after night, you watch the newly awakened guard adjust his clothing. His movements seem automatic. Years of repetition have transformed the routine into muscle memory. Pull on gloves, check equipment, stretch stiff muscles, climb the stairs, repeat. The process feels almost timeless. Meanwhile, the watchman who just completed his shift removes his outer cloak and settles onto the mattress that has become available. His shoulders visibly relax. Relief arrives quickly. Exhaustion arrives even faster. Within minutes, his eyes begin to close. The exchange fascinates you. Waking! Another sleeping? The cycle continues without pause. The tower never truly rests because its guardians cannot all rest at once. The room briefly fills with soft sounds, wool brushing against wood, boots scraping stone, a quiet yawn quickly suppressed. Then silence returns. You sit near the window and imagine how these fragmented sleeping patterns affected daily life. Modern people often think of sleep as a single block of hours. Medieval guards rarely enjoyed that luxury. Their bodies learned to seize opportunities whenever possible. A short rest mattered, even a brief nap helped. Fatigue became a constant companion. Municipal regulations preserved from several medieval towns reveal concerns about inattentive watchmen. Authorities frequently emphasized alertness, attendance, and proper conduct during night watches. Such repeated instructions suggest officials worried about tired guards far more often than they worried about perfectly rested ones. Real life tends to be messy, even in stone towers, especially in stone towers. A particularly interesting detail appears in some descriptions of medieval military life. Experienced soldiers and guards often developed impressive abilities to fall asleep quickly when circumstances allowed. Waiting for ideal conditions simply was not practical. Opportunity mattered more than perfection. A mattress available now was preferable to a better mattress available later. The sleeping guard nearby demonstrates the principle beautifully. Only moments ago he was climbing stairs. Now he appears completely asleep. Remarkable. You suspect modern commuters might admire such efficiency. Outside, clouds drift across the moon once more. Their shadows move over rooftops and streets below. The city seems peaceful from this height. Yet the guards cannot afford complete trust in appearances. That responsibility explains the rotating system. Someone must always remain awake. Someone must always watch. The documentary evidence becomes somewhat uneven when researchers attempt to calculate exactly how long individual guards slept between shifts. Different cities maintain different requirements. Wealth, population size, local threats, and administrative practices all influenced outcomes. No universal schedule existed. A guard in one city might enjoy more rest than his counterpart elsewhere. Another might experience the opposite. The medieval world rarely provided standardized solutions. The lantern flame flickers. A cool draft passes through the chamber. You pull your cloak slightly closer around your shoulders. Even indoors, the tower reminds everyone who truly controls conditions: the weather. Stone walls offer protection, but they cannot entirely eliminate discomfort. The guard sleeping nearest the wall has wrapped himself tightly within his blanket. Only part of his face remains visible. His posture suggests long familiarity with chilly nights. A lesser-known observation appears in various military accounts across different centuries. People often slept wearing portions of their clothing when circumstances required rapid response. Removing every layer before bed might save comfort, but it cost precious time during emergencies. Tower guards likely understood that calculation very well. Readiness competed constantly with relaxation. The staircase echoes again. Another watchman passes through without stopping. His lantern casts moving shadows across the room before disappearing upward. The chamber briefly brightens, then darkens once more. You find yourself listening to the sounds of sleeping, slow breathing, occasional movement, the soft rustle of blankets. Together they create an atmosphere surprisingly calm, despite the underlying responsibilities surrounding everyone here. Time passes quietly. The sleeping guard shifts position. The resting watchman beside him snores once, just once, then stops. A small moment, a very human moment. No amount of military discipline seems capable of defeating every snore in history. The tower accepts this reality with admirable patience. Researchers continue examining how medieval workers balance sleep deprivation with demanding responsibilities. Direct evidence remains limited, but practical experience suggests many people functioned under conditions that modern sleep specialists might view with concern. Yet they adapted. People generally do. The human body possesses extraordinary flexibility when circumstances require it. You glance toward the staircase leading upward. Somewhere above, another guard stands watch beneath the stars. He scans roads and rooftops while the city sleeps. Eventually he too will descend seeking rest. Someone else will replace him. The cycle will continue. The tower depends upon it. As the night deepens further, you begin to appreciate an important truth about sleeping in medieval guard towers. The challenge was not merely finding a place to lie down. The greater challenge involved accepting interruption. Rest was temporary, sleep was conditional. Duty always waited nearby. And still, generation after generation, weary watchmen climbed these stairs, wrapped themselves in blankets, closed their eyes, and found whatever rest they could before the next call to wakefulness arrived. The tower settles into one of the quietest hours of the night. The watchmen resting in the chamber remain asleep. Above them, other guards continue their duties beneath the stars. The lantern burns lower now, producing a softer glow that barely reaches the far corners of the room. You decide to climb once more. The staircase greets you like an old acquaintance. Upward, around another curve, then another. The familiar rhythm returns. Stone beneath your boots, cool air against your skin. The distant sound of the city filtering through narrow openings. By the time you reach the upper platform again, the night feels deeper than before. The moon hangs higher, the streets below appear almost empty. A guard stands near the parapet, watching the darkness beyond the walls. You join him quietly. For several moments, neither of you speaks. The silence itself becomes noticeable. Then you realize something surprising. The city is not truly silent at all. Far from it. Once your ears adjust, countless sounds emerge from the darkness. A dog barks somewhere among the houses. A horse stamps a hoof inside a stubble. Wood creaks as buildings respond to cooling temperatures. A distant door closes. Then another. The city breathes. Slowly, steadily, endlessly. You lean against the stone parapet and listen. The experience feels strangely calming. Many modern people associate medieval cities with noise and chaos. During daylight hours, that reputation is often deserved. Markets bustled, craftsmen worked, Animals moved through streets, merchants shouted advertisements. Night transformed everything, activity diminished. Sounds spread farther. Individual noises became easier to hear. One conclusion supported by numerous urban records is that frequently took nighttime noise seriously. Curfews, gate closures, and regulations helped reduce disturbances after dark. Maintaining order during sleeping hours benefited both residents and officials. The result created a different acoustic landscape. Not silent, simply quieter. A faint breeze passes across the tower. You smell damp earth from fields beyond the walls. Smoke from household hearths lingers in the air as well. Somewhere nearby comes the scent of burning wood. The mixture feels distinctly medieval. Natural smells, human smells, the smells of a city settling into sleep. The guard beside you shifts his weight and continues scanning the horizon. His attention remains divided between the countryside and the streets below. Listening forms part of his job. Vision alone cannot reveal everything. A curious reference appears in several historical accounts involving nighttime watchmen and bells. Guards as often relied upon bell signals to mark time, communicate warnings, or coordinate activities. Different patterns carried different meanings. For experienced watchmen, bells became a language, a familiar one. You hear one now. A distant church bell rings through the darkness. The note drifts across rooftops and chimneys before reaching the tower. It hangs briefly in the air, then fades. The guard barely reacts. The sound belongs to the normal rhythm of the city. His attention remains focused elsewhere. You continue listening. A cat yowls somewhere below. Not a dramatic yowl, just enough to remind everyone that medieval cats possess personalities every bit as confident as modern ones. A moment later comes the flutter of wings. Perhaps a bird disturbed from its perch. Perhaps something else. The darkness rarely explains itself. The tower platform feels exposed compared with the chambers below. Wind touches your face more directly here. The stone beneath your hand remains cold despite the season. You imagine spending hours in this position, watching, listening, waiting. The challenge becomes obvious. Staying alert during quiet nights required discipline. Human attention naturally drifts when little happens. Researchers generally agree that maintaining vigilance represented one of the central difficulties of guard duty. Exciting moments were rare. Long periods of routine observation were far more common. The irony is amusing. Guards existed because danger might appear. Most nights, it did not. The watchman therefore spent hours preparing for events that usually never arrived. A soft sound reaches you from within the city. Sing. Very faint singing. You strain to listen. The melody drifts through the darkness for a few moments before disappearing. Perhaps someone is returning home late. Perhaps a small gathering continues despite the hour. The sound vanishes as quickly as it arrived. Night has a talent for that. A surviving account from one medieval town mentions complaints about watchmen chatting too much during duty. Authorities apparently worried that conversation could become a distraction. The complaint feels wonderfully familiar. Managers have been telling employees to focus on their work for a very long time. Some traditions prove remarkably durable. The wind strengthens briefly. Your cloak flutters against your legs. Far beyond the city walls, trees sway gently beneath moonlight. Their movement produces a faint rustling sound that barely reaches the tower. Nature contributes its own voice to the night. The documentary record grows somewhat murkier when examining exactly how much reliance guards placed upon hearing versus sight. Different environments created different priorities. Dense urban areas produced one set of challenges. Rural locations produced another. No single answer fits every tower, yet listening clearly mattered. A watchman who ignored unusual sounds risked missing important information. You close your eyes for a moment, not sleeping, just listening. The city reveals itself differently this way. You hear distant water flowing somewhere beyond the walls, a horse snorting inside a stone, a loose shutter tapping softly against wood, the murmur of wind around stone. None of these sounds seem threatening. Together they create a portrait of ordinary life. The guard remains alert. Years of experience have likely taught him which sounds deserve attention and which belong to the background. That skill may have been as valuable as any weapon he carried. Another bell rings, then silence follows once more. The night feels vast, peaceful, almost dreamlike. Eventually you open your eyes and gaze across the sleeping rooftops. Moonlight paints silver edges along chimneys and tiles. Thin clouds drift slowly overhead. The city appears calm from this height, yet its calm depends partly upon people like the watchman standing beside you. People who sacrifice uninterrupted sleep. People who learn the language of nighttime sounds. People who remain awake so others can rest. As the hours continue passing, the tower listens with them. Every creak, every bell, every distant footstep. The night speaks constantly, and those charged with protecting the city learn to hear its quiet conversation better than anyone else. The night air feels noticeably colder now. You remain on the upper platform for a few moments longer, watching thin clouds drift across the stars. The guard beside you pulls his cloak tighter around his shoulders. His movement is small, almost automatic. The temperature has dropped. You feel it too. The stone beneath your hand seems colder than before. The breeze carries a sharper edge. Even the city below appears quieter, as if the chill has encouraged every remaining resident to retreat deeper beneath blankets and shutters. Eventually you leave the exposed platform and descend toward the shelter of the tower's interior. The change is immediate. The wind disappears. The sounds soften, yet the cold follows you inside. This is one of the great paradoxes of medieval towers. Their thick walls offered protection from attack. They did not necessarily offer comfort. You pause halfway down the staircase and place your palm against the stone. It feels almost icy despite the season. The masonry has been absorbing cool air for hours. During winter months, the sensation would have been even more dramatic. Living inside such a structure demanded constant adaptation. Especially at night, you reach the sleeping chamber once more. The lantern still burns, though more weakly now. Several guards remain asleep. One lies curled tightly beneath his blanket. Another has pulled his hood over his head in an apparent effort to preserve every possible degree of warmth. It seems a sensible strategy. The room itself feels chilly, not freezing, just cold enough to make comfort an ongoing project. A surviving collection of municipal expenses from various medieval towns reveals frequent purchases of firewood, fuel, and maintenance supplies connected to defensive structures. Warmth mattered. Communities understood that guards performed better when they could avoid becoming completely miserable. That goal proved easier to understand than to achieve. You sit near the wall and study the room again. The wool blankets now seem more valuable than ever. Their rough texture might not impress anyone seeking luxury, but they perform an important task. Wool retains warmth surprisingly well, even when conditions become damp. For medieval workers exposed to changing weather, this quality made it indispensable. The smell of wool fills part of the chamber. Earthy, familiar, comforting in its own way. Nearby, a guard shifts beneath his blanket. The straw mattress rustles softly beneath him. You cannot help wondering how many winter nights he has spent here. Dozens, hundreds, perhaps more. The tower becomes easier to understand when viewed through the seasons. During summer, heat created one set of challenges. During winter, an entirely different battle emerged. Cold became an opponent, a persistent one. The staircase produces a faint echo as another watchman descends from above. He enters the room rubbing his hands together. The gesture says everything. No explanation required. He approaches a small brazier positioned near the wall. Only a few glowing coals remain inside. Their dim orange light adds another layer of warmth to the room's atmosphere, even if their actual heating power appears limited. You move closer. The faint smell of charcoal hangs in the air. The watchman extends his hands toward the remaining heat and sighs with obvious appreciation. A simple pleasure, an important one. One overlooked detail of medieval life is how much daily energy revolved around temperature management. Modern heating systems often operate quietly in the background. Medieval people interacted with warmth directly. Fires needed tending, fuel needed gathering, clothing required careful layering. Warmth demanded effort. The tower makes that reality impossible to ignore. You notice that several guards sleep while still wearing much of their clothing. Cloaks remain nearby. Boots sit within easy reach. Heavy garments are not stored far away. Partly this reflects readiness. Partly it reflects common sense. Removing too many layers would mean waking to unpleasant cold later. A curious note appears in a few historical descriptions of military life. Some guards reportedly shared blankets during especially cold periods. Modern expectations of personal sleeping space often did not apply. Practical concerns frequently outweighed privacy. Staying warm mattered more. The evidence becomes difficult to interpret when historians attempt to determine exactly how cold individual towers became during severe winters. Construction methods varied. Locations differed. Weather patterns changed over centuries. No universal answer exists. What remains clear is that cold occupied a central place in daily experience. The watchman by the brazier eventually rises and prepares to return upstairs. Before leaving, he places another small piece of fuel among the coals. The glow brightens slightly. A tiny victory. The chamber seems more welcoming immediately. You watch the fire for a while. The gentle crackle blends with the breathing of sleeping guards. Shadows shift across stone walls. The lantern flickers in response to subtle currents of air. Together they create a surprisingly peaceful scene, yet comfort remains fragile. A stronger draft slips through the room unexpectedly. You feel it against your neck. The tower is always connected to the outside world. Tiny gaps, narrow openings, stone passages. Air finds pathways. It always does. Far above, the watch platforms remain fully exposed to the elements. Guards stationed there endure conditions far harsher than those inside this chamber. Rain, snow, wind, and frost all become part of the job. The sleeping quarters merely offer temporary relief, not complete escape. A surviving account from a northern European town mentions expenditures for additional clothing issued to watchmen during colder months. The document reads almost like an admission that bravery alone could not solve every problem. Sometimes people simply needed warmer garments. History contains many practical truths. The room grows quieter again. Most of the guards remain asleep. One snores softly for several seconds before rolling onto his side. Another pulls a blanket closer around his shoulders without fully waking. The movement seems instinctive. Bodies learn their own methods of survival. You glance toward the staircase leading upward. The darkness there feels deeper than elsewhere. Somewhere beyond it, another watchman stands beneath the night sky. Cold air surrounds him. Wind brushes across stone parapets. Stars shine overhead. Eventually he will descend seeking warmth. Another guard will take his place. The cycle continues, as it has for hours, as it has for generations. The tower itself seems built around that rhythm. Rest and duty, cold and shelter, wakefulness and sleep. You settle back against the wall and listen to the faint crackle of the brazier. Outside, the medieval city sleeps beneath a cooling sky. Inside, weary watchmen gather what warmth they can, wrapping themselves in wool and patience while waiting for the long night to pass. The brazier glows softly in the corner. Its remaining coals provide a modest source of warmth, but perhaps an even greater source of comfort. Human beings have always gathered around small pockets of light during darkness. The guards in this tower are no exception. You remain in the sleeping chamber while the night advances. A few men rest on mattresses. Others sit quietly on benches. One watchman mends part of a glove using a needle and thread. Another drinks from a small cup while staring into the coals. No one speaks very much. The atmosphere feels familiar. Not because of the tower itself, because of the people. The room reminds you that medieval guards were not merely uniforms standing atop walls. They were co-workers, companions, neighbours, and occasionally rivals. Long nights spent together created relationships that could not easily be avoided. The tower forced company upon everyone for better. Or worse, a guard enters from the staircase carrying a lantern. His arrival produces several murmured greetings. Nothing enthusiastic, nothing dramatic. Simply the quiet acknowledgement of people who have spent many hours in one another's presence. The exchange feels natural, comfortable, routine. You realize that sleeping in a tower rarely meant sleeping alone. Shared quarters were the norm. The mattress beside yours might belong to a friend, or someone who annoyed you greatly. Either way, you would likely spend the night only a few feet apart. Records preserved from medieval towns indicate that communal living arrangements were common across many professions. Limited space and practical concerns encouraged people to share rooms, buildings, and sleeping areas. Privacy existed, but often in smaller amounts than modern audiences might expect. The tower reflects that broader world. You glance around the chamber. The arrangement leaves little room for isolation. Conversations would be difficult to avoid. Snoring would certainly be impossible to ignore. The thought produces a quiet smile. One sleeping guard seems determined to demonstrate the point. A low snore emerges from beneath his blanket. Then another. The sound continues for several moments before fading again. Nobody reacts. Apparently this performance has occurred before. The sleeping man's reputation may already be well established. The room carries a mixture of scents that have become increasingly familiar. Wool, smoke, leather, lantern oil, damp stone. There is also the faint smell of human presence. Not unpleasant, just real. People living closely together always leave traces of themselves behind. You sit near the brazier while two guards exchange a few quiet observations about the weather. Their conversation is brief but revealing. Both men speak about temperature, wind, and clouds with remarkable attention. This makes sense. Weather directly influences their work. A rainy night feels different from a clear one. Strong winds affect visibility and comfort. Winter storms can transform ordinary duties into genuine hardships. The tower teaches respect for the sky. One fascinating glimpse into medieval daily life comes from payroll records that occasionally note absences, replacements, and disciplinary actions among guards. Reading such documents reveals an unexpectedly familiar world of scheduling problems, missed duties, and workplace frustrations. Some things truly never change. Somewhere in every century, someone is complaining about a co-worker. The guard sewing his glove finally finishes his repair. He holds the garment up to inspect his work and nods with satisfaction. A small success, the sort that brightens an otherwise ordinary night. You notice that many personal belongings remain modest. A pouch, a cup, a cloak, a few practical tools. Most possessions are portable because tower life revolves around function rather than display. Yet people still personalize their surroundings. One guard has carved a simple design into the handle of a wooden spoon. Another keeps a small token hanging from his belt. Tiny details, tiny expressions of identity. The historical trail becomes somewhat faint when researchers attempt to reconstruct friendships among ordinary guards. Official records rarely document casual relationships. Administrators cared more about duties and payments than about social bonds. Even so, human experience fills the gaps. People working together under demanding conditions tend to form connections. The tower almost guarantees it. You imagine countless conversations that vanished into history. Stories about families, complaints about supervisors, prediction about weather, rumors from distant towns, arguments about whose turn it was to climb the highest stairs. Perhaps especially that last one. The lantern flame flickers as another draft passes through the room. Several guards instinctively adjust their cloaks. Nobody appears surprised. The building has many ways of reminding occupants that comfort remains temporary. Near the doorway, a watchman quietly shares a piece of bread with another guard preparing for duty. The gesture is simple enough that it might easily go unnoticed. Yet it reveals something important. Life inside the tower depends on cooperation. Stands watch forever. No one rests forever. The system functions because individuals help maintain it together. An intriguing detail appears in a few medieval references to shared meals among watchmen. Food could strengthen morale just as effectively as it filled stomachs. Eating together reinforced social ties that became valuable during difficult nights. People bond through routine. Always have, always will. The sleeping chamber grows slightly busier as shifts change. One man rises while another prepares to rest. A brief conversation takes place near the brazier. Someone laughs softly. The sound feels surprisingly warm. Laughter transforms rooms, even stone rooms, especially stone rooms. You watch the faces illuminated by the lantern light. Most are ordinary, tired, weathered, human. These are not legendary knights from epic stories. They are working people performing necessary tasks. Their lives contain responsibilities, frustrations, friendships, and moments of quiet amusement that reality makes them easier to imagine. More real somehow, the surviving evidence leaves room for interpretation regarding how strong social bonds became within different guard companies. Conditions varied considerably between towns. Leadership mattered. Local customs mattered. Personalities mattered too. Some groups likely functioned like close communities, others perhaps less so. Human nature has always produced both outcomes. The night continues passing. The brazier glows. The guards settle into familiar routines. A few sleep, a few talk, a few prepare for duty. Together they create a small world within the larger city surrounding them. And as you sit among them, listening to the murmur of quiet voices and the occasional crackle of coals, you begin to understand another truth about sleeping in medieval guard towers. Rest was never just about mattresses and blankets. It was also about company. The familiar faces nearby, the shared hardships, the small conversations that filled long hours. Because even in a tower built for defense, people remained people, and the warmth provided by companionship could sometimes rival the warmth of any fire. The conversation near the brazier gradually fades. One guard leaves for his assigned watch. Another settles onto a mattress. The room grows quieter again, though not entirely silent. The tower never seems completely still. Somewhere there is always movement. Somewhere a staircase creaks. Somewhere a lantern flickers. The night continues its slow passage. After spending hours among the watchmen, you begin noticing another important part of tower life. Food, not grand feasts, not elaborate banquets. Just the simple meals that help tired people continue functioning through long nights. A wooden cup sits beside one mattress. Nearby rests a small pouch containing bread. Another guard unwraps a piece of cheese before taking a seat on the bench. The sight immediately makes you hungry. Perhaps that is not surprising. The smell arrives a moment later. Fresh bread would be too much to expect at this hour, but the coarse loaf still carries a faint grain scent. The cheese smells sharp and earthy. Combined with the smoke from the brazier and the lantern oil, the room suddenly feels more alive. People often remember medieval warfare and politics. Daily meals receive less attention, yet food shaped almost every aspect of life, including sleep. The guard tears off a piece of bread and eats slowly. No one rushes him. These quiet moments between duties hold real value. A person who spends hours exposed to wind and cold appreciates simple comforts. Researchers examining medieval urban life frequently encounter references to bread, ale, cheese, onions, and other practical foods consumed by ordinary workers. Exact diets varied according to region, wealth, and season, but simple. Filling meals remained common. Nothing fancy, just reliable. The kind of food designed to sustain effort. You move closer to the brazier and notice another watchman warming a small pot. Whatever rests inside releases a pleasant aroma into the chamber. Herbs, perhaps a thin stew, perhaps broth. The smell immediately transforms the atmosphere. Food has a remarkable ability to make a place feel inhabited. The tower remains a military structure, but at moments like this it also resembles a temporary household. People eating, people resting, people preparing for another day. A curious entry from a medieval account book records payments for ale supplied to guards. Such references appear often enough to suggest that drink formed a routine part of life for many watchmen. This does not necessarily mean everyone spent nights in a cheerful haze. Medieval ale was frequently weaker than many modern alcoholic beverages, and it often served practical purposes as well as social ones. Still, the thought of a tired watchman enjoying a cup after a cold shift feels entirely understandable. You certainly would not blame him. One guard lifts a wooden mug and drinks slowly. The liquid catches the lantern light for an instant before disappearing. A simple action, a timeless one. The sleeping men nearby remain undisturbed. Years of shared quarters have likely taught them to rest through ordinary activity. Eating, quiet conversation, and changing shifts continue around them without causing concern. Their adaptability is impressive. The room feels warmer now, not because the temperature has changed significantly, because people are awake. Voices contribute warmth. The smell of food contributes warmth. Even the sight of someone holding a steaming cup creates a sense of comfort. A detail preserved in several town records suggests that some guards received portions of food or allowances connected to their service. Arrangements varied considerably from place to place, but communities generally understood that workers performing essential duties required support. Hungry guards rarely make excellent guards. That lesson seems fairly universal. You watch a man carefully scrape the last bits of food from a bowl. Nothing goes to waste. The medieval world operated much closer to necessity than abundance. Resources mattered. Meals mattered. Leftovers mattered. Waste was a luxury many people could not afford. The available evidence becomes less clear when historians attempt to reconstruct exactly what guards ate during overnight shifts. Records tend to focus on payments and supplies rather than detailed menus. As a result, much depends upon educated interpretation. Different towns likely produced different answers, yet certain patterns remain visible. Bread appears repeatedly, ale appears repeatedly, cheese appears repeatedly. The ordinary foods of everyday life accompany the watchman into the tower. A faint laugh emerges from the bench near the wall. One guard has apparently shared a story. The others smile. You do not hear the entire conversation, but the reaction tells you enough. Humor survives every century. The same is true of storytelling. Loo nights encourage both. One lesser-known aspect of medieval social life involved the exchange of news through conversation. Towers, gates, and guard posts often became places where information circulated. Travelers arrived with rumors. Merchants brought reports from distant towns. A watchman might learn surprising things while simply doing his job. Whether every rumor proved reliable is another matter entirely. Human beings have always enjoyed dramatic stories. Accuracy sometimes follows at respectful distance. The food gradually disappears. Bowls empty, cups are set aside. The brief meal comes to an end, yet its effects remain visible. Shoulders relax, expression soften, energy returns. The guards appear more prepared for the remaining hours of darkness. You understand why. A warm meal before sleep offers comfort. A warm meal before standing watch offers courage. Sometimes it offers more. The brazier crackles softly. The smell of herbs lingers in the air. Outside, the city remains asleep beneath moonlit rooftops. Inside, the tower continues its quiet routines. Eating, resting, waiting, preparing. The rhythm feels ancient, steady, human. You glance toward the staircase leading upward once more. Soon another watchman will climb those steps. He may carry a lantern. He may carry a spear. He may carry the memory of a simple meal enjoyed among companions. Whatever else he carries, he will bring part of this room with him. Its warmth, its conversation, its brief moments of comfort, because sleeping in a medieval guard tower involved more than enduring cold stone walls and interrupted rest. It also involved small rituals, a cup shared near a brazier, bread broken among co-workers, a few quiet moments before returning to duty, and sometimes those modest comforts made all the difference between merely surviving the night and passing through it with a little contentment. The meal has ended. Wooden cups sit empty beside the wall. The last traces of warm broth have disappeared from bowls, one by one. The guards return to familiar routines. Some prepare for sleep, others prepare for another climb to the watch platform. The tower settles once again into its nighttime rhythm. You notice the lanterns. Until now they have simply existed in the background, providing light when needed. Yet as the night deepens, they begin to feel far more important. In a world without electric lighting, every flame matters. Every lantern, every candle, every glowing coal, light shapes the experience of darkness itself. You pick up a lantern resting near the bench. Its metal frame feels slightly warm. The glass carries faint traces of soot. The flame inside flickers gently, casting moving shadows across your hand. Immediately the room changes, not physically, visually. The stone walls seem alive with shifting patterns. Wooden beams stretch and contract as shadows slide across them. Corners appear deeper, distances seem less certain. A tower at night becomes a place of illusion. The lantern creates islands of brightness surrounded by oceans of darkness. You begin climbing the stairs again, lantern in hand. The narrow spiral staircase appears completely different now, during daylight. The steps would feel merely steep under lantern light. Every turn hides what comes next. The glow reaches only a short distance ahead. Everything beyond remains mysterious. Your footsteps echo softly. The flame dances with each movement. Tiny shadows leap across ancient stone. You understand why nighttime watch duty demanded concentration. Human eyes naturally search darkness for meaning. A shifting shadow can resemble movement. A distant shape can appear threatening. The imagination becomes remarkably active when supplied with only partial information. People in every century have experienced this. The medieval world was no exception. Town regulations preserved from several regions often required guards to carry lights while performing certain duties. Practical necessity drove these rules. Stairs, walls, gates, and narrow passages become far more dangerous when invisible. Avoiding accidental injury was an excellent idea. The staircase finally opens into an upper chamber. Moonlight enters through a narrow slit window. Its pale silver glow mixes with the warmer lantern light in a surprisingly beautiful way. The two sources create different colors across the stone floor. One cool, one golden. Together they transform the room. A watchman sits quietly near the opening. His lantern rests beside him. Its flame reflects faintly in his eyes. Gaze outward toward the sleeping city. You join him. For several moments, neither of you speaks. The lantern beside you crackles softly. Outside, rooftops shimmer. Beneath moonlight, chimneys cast long shadows. The city appears peaceful, yet darkness changes familiar places. The same street can feel completely different after sunset. The same building can appear unfamiliar. The same tower can seem larger, more mysterious, more alive. A small note hidden within a medieval municipal record mentions the replacement of damaged lanterns used by watchmen. It is a brief entry, easy to overlook, yet it reveals something important. Light sources were valuable equipment. Communities expected guards to have them, maintain them, and use them properly. Without light, even routine tasks became difficult. The watchman shifts slightly and adjusts the lantern wick. The flame brightens. Immediately the chamber changes again. It is astonishing how much influence a small flame can possess. You smell heated oil. The scent mingles with cold stone and distant smoke from city hearths. Together they create an aroma that feels inseparable from nighttime life. A gentle breeze enters through the opening. The lantern flame bends. For a moment the shadows leap dramatically across the wall. Then everything settles. You find yourself watching the movement almost hypnotically. People throughout history spent countless hours observing flames. Before electric lighting, fire provided not only illumination but companionship. A lantern could make an isolated space feel inhabited. A candle could make darkness less intimidating. A brazier could transform a room entirely. One forgotten complaint from a medieval town involved guards who allegedly neglected proper maintenance of lighting equipment. Whether the accusation was fair remains unclear. Perhaps they truly were careless. Perhaps someone simply needed a convenient target for criticism. Workplace disputes are hardly a modern invention. The night continues around you, far below. A single window suddenly brightens. Someone has awakened. Perhaps a baker preparing dough before dawn. Perhaps a parent tending a child. Perhaps a merchant unable to sleep. The tiny light catches your attention immediately. In darkness, every flame becomes significant. The city seems dotted with stars, some above, some below. The available evidence tells us a great deal about walls and gates and military organization. Everyday experiences with light are harder to reconstruct. Written records rarely describe what people considered ordinary. That is unfortunate, because lantern light shaped countless moments. Conversation, meals, stories, night watches, quiet periods before sleep. The watchman beside you stretches his arms and stands. Another guard will soon replace him. The familiar cycle continues. Before leaving, he takes the lantern with him. The chamber instantly grows darker. Moonlight remains, but the change feels dramatic. Corners disappear, details soften. The room becomes simpler, more mysterious. You suddenly understand how dependent medieval people were upon controlled sources of light. Darkness was not merely an absence, it was a presence, a real part of life. The replacement guard arrives carrying a different lantern. New shadows immediately appear, the chamber changes shape again. The transformation feels almost not supernatural, simply human. Light reveals, light conceals, light creates atmosphere. As you descend toward the sleeping chamber once more, your lantern illuminates each step ahead. The warm glow follows you around every curve of the staircase. Above, darkness waits patiently. Below, tired guards rest beneath blankets. Between those two worlds travels a small moving flame, guiding, comforting, protecting, and for the watchman who spent long nights inside of medieval towers, that modest circle of light may have provided something nearly as valuable as sleep itself. A sense of certainty in an uncertain darkness, a companion against the shadows, a reminder that morning, however distant, would eventually arrive. You return to the sleeping chamber carrying the lantern. Its glow stretches across the floor and brushes against the rough stone walls. Most of the guards remain asleep. A few turn occasionally beneath blankets. Others rest so still they seem carved from the tower itself. The room feels peaceful, yet peace at night has always carried a companion. Imagination. The darker the world becomes, the more active the mind can grow. You settle onto the bench near the brazier and listen to the quiet sounds surrounding you. Somewhere above, a watchman shifts his weight. Wind whispers faintly through a narrow opening. A blanket rustles. Nothing alarming, nothing unusual. Still, the darkness beyond the lantern's reach feels different. Not threatening exactly, just unknown. For people living in the medieval world, nighttime possessed a character all its own. Once daylight disappeared, familiar places changed. Roads became uncertain, forests seemed deeper, empty streets appeared stranger. The tower magnifies that feeling. Its narrow chambers, twisting stairs, and hidden corners encourage reflection. Long hours spent awake during darkness naturally leave room for thoughts that rarely appear during busy afternoons. You glance toward the staircase. The shadows there seem deeper than before. Of course, you know there is nothing unusual waiting beyond the curve, but knowing something and feeling something are not always the same. The guards understood that as well. Across medieval Europe, people held a wide range of beliefs about the night. Some concerns centered on practical dangers, others drifted toward folklore, religion, and superstition. The boundary between the natural and supernatural often felt less rigid than many modern people assume. Darkness invited possibilities, some comforting, some unsettling. A guard near the wall murmurs softly in his sleep. The sound barely lasts a moment. Then silence returns. You wonder what he is dreaming about. His family, perhaps. A familiar street. A warm meal. Dreams rarely leave records behind, which is unfortunate. They would provide fascinating glimpses into ordinary lives. Instead, historians must rely upon scattered references, religious writings, and occasional personal accounts. The result is an incomplete picture, yet enough survives to reveal that dreams mattered. People discussed them, interpreted them, sometimes feared them. A small collection of medieval writings includes discussions of symbolic dreams and their possible meanings. Religious scholars, physicians, and ordinary people often viewed dreams differently, but many agreed they deserved attention. Not every dream was considered meaningless. Some seemed important, at least to the dreamer. The lantern flickers. Its moving light briefly transforms a hanging cloak into something resembling a human figure. You blink. The illusion vanishes immediately. A cloak remains a cloak. Nothing more. Still, the moment helps explain why nighttime stories thrive in every culture. Human perception enjoys playing tricks after midnight. One forgotten town regulation addressed a surprisingly specific concern. Night watchmen were instructed not to create unnecessary panic through false alarms. The rule sounds obvious, yet its existence suggests that mistakes occasionally happened. Perhaps someone misidentified a shadow. Perhaps a harmless noise seemed suspicious. Perhaps imagination became slightly over-enthusiastic. It happens. The sleeping chamber remains calm. The guards appear completely unconcerned by the shadows or strange possibilities. Experience likely serves as an excellent antidote to unnecessary fear. After enough nights in the same tower, every creak becomes familiar. Every draft develops a personality. Every staircase acquires a recognizable voice. Knowledge replaces uncertainty. Mostly, a breeze slips through the room once again. The lantern flame bends sideways. The shadows shift. You hear the faint tapping of something outside. Tap, tap, tap. The sound continues briefly before stopping. A branch, perhaps a loose shutter. The exact source remains unknown. The explanation hardly matters. The sound belongs to the ordinary life of the city. Yet you can easily imagine a newly assigned guard finding it far more mysterious. A particularly charming detail appears in several medieval stories involving watchmen and supposed supernatural encounters. In many cases, the terrifying figure eventually turned out to be something far less dramatic. A wandering animal, a traveller, a misplaced object. Human beings have been startling themselves in darkness for a very long time. The tower provides excellent opportunities for such experiences. You smile quietly at the thought. Nearby, one guard snores. A second responds with an irritated movement despite remaining asleep. The interaction feels oddly familiar. No supernatural force could compete with the practical challenge of sharing sleeping quarters. The night advances, the brazier glows faintly. Lantern light paints golden patterns across the floor. I begin thinking about the mental demands placed upon watchmen. Physical exhaustion is obvious enough. Less obvious is the challenge of spending long periods alone with your thoughts. A person standing watch atop a tower cannot avoid reflection forever. Memories emerge, worries emerge, plans emerge. Sometimes imagination joins them. The surviving material does not tell us exactly what individual guards feared most during lonely watches. Every person carried different concerns. Some likely worried about real dangers approaching the city. Others may have worried about family members, debts, illnesses, or uncertain futures. Human concerns rarely change as much as technology does. The guard sleeping nearest the wall rolls over and settles again. His blanket slips slightly. A companion reaches over without opening his eyes and pulls it back into place. The gesture lasts only seconds. Then both return to sleep. A tiny act of kindness. A very human one. The room grows quieter still. Outside, clouds drift slowly across the moon. Their movement alters the brightness entering through the narrow window slit. Light fades, returns, fades again. The changing illumination gives the chamber a dreamlike quality. You understand now why stories flourished in places like this. The tower contains all the necessary ingredients. Darkness, silence, isolation, new hours. Yet despite every superstition, every strange tale, and every imagined shadow, the reality remains remarkably ordinary. Tired guards sleep, other guards stand watch. The city rests below, the night continues. And perhaps that is the most comforting truth of all. Most darkness contains far fewer mysteries than people fear. Most shadows conceal nothing extraordinary. Most nights end exactly as expected, with the slow arrival of dawn. Until then, the tower keeps its secrets, its stories, and its sleeping watchmen wrapped together beneath lantern light and ancient. The shadows continue their slow dance across the chamber floor. For a time, everything remains calm. The guards sleep. The brazier glows faintly. Lantern light flickers against stone that has witnessed countless nights much like this one. Then you hear it, a soft sound at first, almost nothing. A distant patter against stone. You listen carefully. Another patter follows, then another. The weather has changed. One of the sleeping guards opens his eyes briefly and tilts his head toward the sound. Apparently satisfied, he closes them again and returns to sleep. This is not an emergency, just weather. Yet weather plays an enormous role in tower life, perhaps more than many people realize. You rise from the bench and climb toward the upper platform. As you ascend, the sound grows clearer. Rain taps softly against the outer walls. Water trickles down stone surfaces. Wind begins to stir among the higher levels of the structure. By the time you reach the top, the transformation is complete. The city looks entirely different. Moonlight has vanished behind clouds. Rooftops gleam faintly beneath fresh rain. Chimneys stand as dark silhouettes against a sky now filled with moving shadows. The watchman remains at his post. His cloak ripples in the wind. Droplets of water cling to the stone parapet. The air smells fresh. Rain often changes the scent of entire landscapes. The dust of roads settles. Smoke becomes less noticeable. Damp earth releases aromas hidden during dry conditions. Even from the tower, you can smell it. Wet soil, wood, rain-soaked thatch. The scent drifts upward from the sleeping city. You pull your cloak tighter. The temperature has fallen slightly. Nothing severe, just enough to remind you that towers remain deeply connected to the environment around them. A watchman cannot simply ignore the weather and experiences it directly. Civic records from many medieval communities reveal regular expenditures for maintaining walls, roofs, gates, and defensive structures damaged by the elements. Rain, frost, and wind posed constant challenges. Nature required no army to cause problems. It worked independently, quite efficiently. The rain strengthens. Water now strikes the stone in steady rhythms. Tiny streams form along grooves and cracks shaped by centuries of exposure. The sound creates a soothing pattern that seems to cover the entire city. Tap, drip, rustle, splash. The noises blend together until they become almost musical. You can imagine a tired guard finding the sound comforting, or frustrating, perhaps both. The watchman glances upward briefly, then returns his attention to the darkness beyond the walls. Duty continues regardless of weather. That reality explains why medieval guards often relied upon heavy wool garments. Wool retained useful insulating properties even when damp. It was not perfect, but perfection rarely entered the conversation. Practicality mattered more. A small detail preserved in some administrative documents concerns the replacement of cloaks and other weather-worn clothing. Such entries are not exciting, they rarely attract attention, yet they reveal how frequently exposure damaged equipment. Rain leaves marks, so does wind. The tower itself bears evidence everywhere. You run your hand along the parapet. The stone feels slick beneath your fingers. Generations of storms have smoothed parts of its surface. Tiny channels reveal where water has travelled again and again across the centuries. The tower remembers every season, every storm, every winter. The city below has become quieter still. Rain encourages silence. Few people choose long walks through wet streets during the middle of the night. Doors remain closed. Shutters remain secured. The world contracts. Attention narrows. Everything feels closer. You remain beside the watchman while rain continues falling. Neither of you speaks much. Conversation seems unnecessary. The weather speaks sufficiently for everyone. The historical picture grows less distinct when trying to determine exactly how individual guards reacted emotionally to long periods of unpleasant weather. Official records rarely preserve personal complaints. That is a shame. One suspects there were many. A great many, after all. Standing in cold rain for hours has never been a universally beloved activity. A stronger gust sweeps across the platform. The watchman's cloak snaps sharply. Water droplets scatter into the darkness. You blink rain from your eyes. For a moment, you consider the luxury of the sleeping chamber below. The mattresses may be lumpy. The blankets may be rough. The room may be cold. Yet compared with this platform, it suddenly seems remarkably inviting. Perspective changes quickly. An intriguing note from one medieval source describes guards seeking shelter in protected corners whenever conditions became especially unpleasant. Authorities did not always approve. The tension between comfort and duty appears to have been a recurring theme. Some workplace challenges prove timeless. The rain eventually begins to soften, not stopping entirely, just easing. The city emerges slightly from the darkness. Rooflines become easier to distinguish. The outlines of distant buildings sharpen once more. You descend toward the lower levels. The staircase feels warmer immediately. Not warm, merely less exposed, a meaningful distinction. Back inside the sleeping chamber, the atmosphere remains calm. Several guards continue sleeping despite the weather outside. Their ability to ignore conditions beyond the walls is impressive. Experience likely helps. When storms become familiar, they lose some of their power to disturb. The brazier still glows. Lantern light still flickers. The room still smells faintly of wool and smoke. A watchman entering from another staircase shakes rainwater from his cloak before sitting near the coals. Tiny droplets sparkle briefly in the lantern light, then disappear. The gesture feels routine, almost ordinary, and perhaps that is the lesson hidden within the storm. For people living and sleeping in medieval guard towers, weather was rarely an extraordinary event. It was simply part of life. Rain came, wind came, cold came. The guards adapted. They dried their cloaks, warmed their hands, and returned to duty when required. Meanwhile, the tower endured exactly as it always had, patient beneath the rain. Beneath the wind, watching over the sleeping city through every season and every storm the night could deliver. Rainwater still glistens on parts of the tower. The storm has weakened, yet the air remains cool and damp. Inside the sleeping chamber, several guards continue resting beneath blankets while others move quietly between shifts. The night feels peaceful, perhaps a little too peaceful. You notice something about the watchmen. Even while resting, they never seem entirely relaxed. A sword leans against one wall. A spear rests beside a doorway. A helmet sits close enough to reach within seconds. The arrangement is deliberate. Nothing important is stored far away. The reason becomes obvious. At any moment, the night can change. You sit near the brazier and watch a guard preparing for sleep. Before lying down, he places his belt, knife, and cloak carefully beside the mattress. The routine appears practiced. Every item occupies a specific place. Movement follows habit. If someone woke him suddenly, he would know exactly where everything was. The tower encourages such behavior. Uncertainty rewards preparation. A sleepy watchman searching for equipment in darkness helps Zobody. The brazier crackles softly. A faint smell of wet wool drifts through the room. Several cloaks hang near the wall, drying after exposure to rain. Water droplets occasionally fall onto the stone floor with tiny clicks. The sound is surprisingly loud, or perhaps the chamber has simply become very quiet. You're being climbing toward the upper levels once again. The staircase feels familiar now. You know its curves, you know its echoes. You even recognize which steps creak more than others. Life inside the tower revolves around repetition. The same paths, the same duties, the same readiness. At the top platform, a watchman stands facing the countryside. Clouds move across the sky. The rain has nearly ended. Visibility is improving. He scans the darkness patiently. There is no sign of trouble. No movement near the walls. No suspicious figures approaching the gates. Still, he continues watching. That is the nature of vigilance. Success often looks exactly like nothing happening. A set of city regulations preserved from one medieval town imposed penalties for guards who abandoned their posts or failed to respond properly during emergencies. Reading such rules centuries later reveals how seriously civic leaders viewed nighttime security. Trust was important. Reliability was even more important. You stand beside the watchman and look across the city. Everything appears calm. Rows of dark rooftops stretch into the distance. Occasional lanterns glow behind shuttered windows. A few chimney fires still burn. The city sleeps. The tower does not. A sudden sound breaks the silence. Metal striking metal. Sharp, brief. The watchman turns immediately. So do you. For one heartbeat, the atmosphere changes completely. The quiet tower becomes alert, every sense sharp. The source soon reveals itself. Another guard descending a staircase has accidentally bumped part of his equipment against the wall. Nothing serious. No danger. Just an ordinary mistake. Yet the reaction is revealing. Everyone responded instantly. Training leaves deep marks. The moment passes. Conversation resumes. Breathing slows. The city remains peaceful. Still, the interruption offers a glimpse into how quickly ordinary nights could transform. One surviving expense list includes payments for horn maintenance and signaling equipment. Such items rarely attract attention in museums, yet they mattered enormously. A warning signal could carry across rooftops far faster than a shouted message. The tools of alarm were carefully maintained for good reason. You imagine hearing one in the middle of the night, a horn echoing through dark streets, a bell ringing urgently, footsteps racing up spiral staircases. The thought changes the atmosphere immediately, even in imagination. The watchman beside you shifts his stance and rubs his eyes. Fatigue remains present, always present. Perhaps that is what makes readiness so impressive. Staying alert while fully rested is one thing. Staying alert after interrupted sleep, cold weather, and long hours is another. The men serving here accomplish that challenge repeatedly. Not perfectly. Nobody could. But consistently enough. Far below, a dog begins barking. Another answers. Then silence returns. The countryside beyond the walls remains dark and still. You notice how carefully the watchman studies familiar surroundings. He is not searching randomly. He knows what belongs. He knows where roads should be. He knows where shadows normally fall. He knows which sounds are ordinary. Anything unusual stands out because experience has built a mental map. A tiny note preserved in a town archive records a complaint about a guard arriving late for duty. The entry is brief and rather stern. Yet it serves as a reminder that watchmen were ordinary people, not tireless machines or machines. They overslept sometimes. They made mistakes. They forgot things. Human nature travelled up these stairs along with everyone else. The clouds begin separating overhead. Moonlight returns gradually. The wet rooftops below reflect silver light. Water gleams on stone walls. The city seems almost polished. Beautiful. Quiet, fragile. You remain there for a while, listening, watching, waiting. The tower itself feels alert, not because stone can think, because every feature of the structure was designed with awareness in mind. Narrow windows, high platforms, defensive walls, observation points. The entire building exists to notice things. Eventually you descend once more. Back in the sleeping chamber, one guard has awakened and another has taken his place on a mattress. The familiar exchange continues. Rest, duty, rest again, a cycle turning steadily through the night. You sit beside the brazier and watch the glowing coals. The chamber feels safe, comfortable even, yet scattered throughout the room remain reminders of responsibility. Weapons nearby. Boots ready. Eddie so Cloaks folded within reach, nothing is ever completely put away. Nothing is ever entirely forgotten, because sleeping in a medieval guard tower meant accepting a simple truth. At any moment, the night could ask something of you. Most nights asked very little. A watch completed, a staircase climbed, a few hours of interrupted sleep. But every guard understood that eventually there might be a night that demanded more, and so they rested lightly beneath blankets and lantern glow, always prepared to wake before the city itself realized anything had changed. The coals in the brazier have burned lower. Their glow now resembles a cluster of tiny stars resting on a bed of ash. Most of the chamber lies in shadow. The lantern near the wall provides just enough light to distinguish faces, blankets, and equipment. So remain awake. The guards around you drift between sleep and duty as the night inches forward. One thing quickly becomes apparent. Nobody separates themselves very far from their equipment. A spear stands within arm's reach of one mattress. A sword belt hangs beside another. Near the doorway rests a helmet whose owner clearly intends to find it quickly if necessary. The arrangement feels natural now. Earlier in the night, it might have seemed excessive. Now it seems practical. Life inside a guard tower leaves little room for delay. You watch a tired watchman prepare for a brief period of rest before lying down. He checks each item carefully. Gloves, belt, cloak, weapon. Only then does he settle beneath a blanket. The sequence resembles a ritual, not ceremonial, functional, the sort of habit repeated so often it no longer requires thought. The tower encourages these habits. After enough nights, preparation becomes automatic. A payroll ledger preserved from a northern European town lists payments connected to weapons maintenance for civic guards. Such entries appear alongside expenses for clothing, repairs, and routine supplies. Together they reveal how seriously communities regarded the readiness of their watchmen. Equipment needed attention, constant attention. Metal rusted, leather wore out, wood cracked. The night rarely forgave neglect. You pick up a helmet resting near the wall. It feels heavier than expected. The metal is cool beneath your fingers. Small scratches cover the surface. Each mark hints at years of service rather than dramatic battles. Most wear came from ordinary use. People often imagine medieval equipment only in moments of combat. In reality, much of its life involved waiting. Waiting in storage, waiting beside a sleeping guard, waiting through long uneventful nights. The helmet returns to its place. The sleeping watchman beside it remains undisturbed. His hand rests surprisingly close to his belt knife. Not because danger is imminent, because habit has taught him where important things belong. A faint draft moves through the chamber. The lantern flame bends, shadows stretch across the walls. Weapons seem larger in the shifting light, more dramatic, more intimidating, yet during most nights, they functioned primarily as reassurance. Tools waiting quietly for tasks that might never come. A small entry hidden among town expenses records the purchase of replacement spear shafts after several had deteriorated from age and use. The note occupies only a few lines. No grand story accompanies it. Still, it offers a glimpse into daily reality. Even weapons experienced ordinary wear. Even defensive preparations involved routine maintenance. History often lives in these small details. A guard near the brazier wakes and sits upright. For a moment he appears confused. Then memory returns. His eyes move immediately toward his equipment. Satisfied that everything remains where it should be, he stands and stretches. The motion produces a series of quiet pops from stiff joints. A very human sound. The sort of sound produced by tired people in every century. You smile slightly. Some experiences require no translation across time. The guard takes a drink from a wooden cup before climbing toward the upper levels. His sword hangs at his side. His cloak brushes against the staircase wall. Soon his footsteps fade into the darkness above. The room grows quiet again. The surviving evidence rarely tells us exactly how individual guards felt about carrying weapons so constantly. Some probably viewed them as essential tools. Others may have considered them burdens. Most likely felt both at different times. The people themselves left few personal reflections. Instead, Their equipment speaks for them. Its placement, its condition, its presence throughout the tower suggest readiness. One forgotten municipal ordinance required guards to appear properly equipped while performing their duties. The wording leaves little room for interpretation. Local authorities expected standards to be maintained. Showing up unprepared was not encouraged. Some rules remain remarkably straightforward. You move toward the doorway and glance into the staircase. The shadows seem endless, yet somewhere above, another watchman stands beneath the clearing sky. Somewhere below, additional guards rest near the city gates. The entire defensive system depends upon countless individuals performing ordinary tasks reliably. There is something oddly comforting about that. No dramatic heroic, no legendary battles, just people doing their jobs. The night outside continues growing calmer. Rain has fully passed now. Moonlight slips through narrow openings and paints pale shapes across the floor. A sleeping guard shifts position. His hand briefly touches the hilt of a nearby weapon before settling again. The movement appears unconscious. Practice has woven readiness into sleep itself. That observation stays with you. Few occupations influence rest so directly. Most people leave work behind when they sleep. Tower guards carry part of it with them, literally. The lantern burns lower. The room becomes softer around the edges. Equipment resting against the walls now appears almost decorative in the dim light, yet appearances remain deceptive. Every item has a purpose. Every item has a place. A faded inventory from one town includes helmets, spears, lanterns, cloaks, and other necessities listed side by side. Reading it today feels surprisingly intimate. The document does not describe battles or famous events. Instead, it quietly records the objects surrounding ordinary watchmen during ordinary nights, objects much like the ones around you now. The chamber feels peaceful. The city sleeps. The guards rest when they can, yet the presence of weapons beside blankets and mattresses reveals an important truth about sleeping in medieval guard towers. Rest existed, comfort existed, friendship existed, but readiness never disappeared entirely. Even during the quietest hours of the night, responsibility remained within reach, usually no farther away than the length of an outstretched arm, and so the tower continues its patient vigil, filled with sleeping men, fading lanterns' light, and silent equipment waiting beside ancient stone walls for a dawn that grows slowly closer. The lantern burns so low now that its flame seems almost sleepy. Its light barely reaches the far corners of the chamber. Most of the guards remain at rest. A few stir occasionally beneath blankets, but the room has entered one of the quietest periods of the night. You rise from the bench. The urge to climb returns. There is one place in the tower you have not yet truly experienced. The highest watch post, the place where the city falls away beneath you and the sky takes over. You take the lantern and begin the ascent. The staircase narrows as you climb. The walls feel closer together. The air grows colder with every turn. Somewhere above, wind hums softly through stone openings. The tower seems taller than before, perhaps because fatigue has settled into your legs, perhaps because the night itself feels heavier now. Eventually you emerge onto the highest platform. The view steals your attention immediately. The storm has completely passed. Clouds drift far beyond the horizon. The moon shines clearly once more. Countless stars stretch overhead, bright enough to make the sky feel almost crowded. Below, the city lies in silence. From this height, individual houses disappear into larger shapes. Streets become dark ribbons. Chimneys become tiny marks against rooftops. Everything seems smaller, calmer, far away. The wind greets you immediately. It moves across the platform without obstruction. There are no nearby buildings to block it, no walls to soften it, nothing but open air. The watchman stationed here pulls his cloak tighter. You understand why. The highest posts offered extraordinary visibility. but they demanded sacrifices. Comfort was among them. A set of instructions issued in one medieval city assigned guards to specific observation points along defensive structures. The wording reveals careful planning. Authorities understood that different locations provided different advantages. Higher positions offered broader views, allowing earlier detection of movement beyond the walls. The benefit was obvious. The discomfort was equally obvious. You move closer to the parapet. The stone feels colder than anywhere else in the tower. Moisture from the recent rain still lingers in tiny depressions. The surface is smooth in some places and rough in others, shaped by centuries of weather. Every storm has left a trace. Every winter has contributed something. The tower wears its age openly. The watchman beside you remains focused on the horizon. He scans roads, fields, and distant tree lines with patient attention. Nothing moves, at least nothing unusual. The countryside appears peaceful. A few scattered lights shine from farms beyond the city. Most a little more than tiny points against the darkness. You imagine standing here for hours, watching, waiting, listening. The experience feels very different from resting below. Down in the sleeping chamber, there is warmth, conversation, and companionship. Up here, there is space. A brief notation found in a town payroll mentions additional compensation for certain duties performed at specific watch positions. Historians do not always agree on the exact reasons behind such payments, yet it is tempting to imagine that some posts earned extra recognition because they were simply less pleasant than others. Standing atop a tower in cold weather certainly qualifies. The wind strengthens briefly. Your cloak flutters behind you. The watchman does not react. He has likely spent hundreds of nights in conditions much like these. Experience changes perception. What feels uncomfortable to you may feel ordinary to him. You notice something else. The sounds are different here. Lower in the tower, you hear footsteps, conversations, and shifting blankets. Up here, the city itself becomes quieter. The wind dominates everything. It whistles around stone edges. It hums through narrow openings. It brushes against clothing and carries distant sounds away before they can fully arrive. The effect is strangely hypnotic. You understand why some guards may have found these posts peaceful despite the exposure. The sky feels enormous. The city feels remote. The rest of the world seems suspended. One small administrative complaint preserved in a municipal archive mentions a watchman who allegedly preferred certain posts over others. The document offers no detailed explanation. It simply records a disagreement. The complaint feels wonderfully human. Even centuries ago, people had favourite assignments and least favourite assignments. The highest platform likely inspired both opinions. Should remain beside the parapet. The stars overhead appear astonishingly bright. Modern cities often hide much of the night sky beneath artificial light. Medieval watchmen enjoyed a different experience. On clear nights, the heavens stretched across the darkness with remarkable clarity. Constellation-guided travellers, planets wandered slowly across familiar paths. The moon illuminated roads and rooftops. The sky was not background scenery. It was part of daily life. A few guards probably knew it well. The historical trail grows thin when we ask how individual watchmen felt about these views. Most left no personal writings. Their thoughts vanished with them. Yet it is difficult to imagine spending years atop towers without occasionally pausing to admire the stars. Some experiences resist indifference. The watchman finally shifts position. He stretches his shoulders and glances toward the city below. His face looks tired. Not unhappy, just tired. A natural condition at this hour. The platform beneath your feet remains exposed from every direction. Rain, wind, frost, and summer, heat all reach this place first. No wonder the lower chambers seem welcoming by comparison. Yet the tower depends upon positions like this. Visibility begins here. Awareness begins here. Security often begins here. The city below sleeps peacefully, partly because someone stands where you stand now. Watching the roads, watching the fields, watching the darkness. Eventually you turn toward the staircase. The descent feels almost comforting. The enclosed stone walls shelter you from the wind immediately. Each step downward brings a little more warmth, a little more quiet, a little more humanity. Soon the sleeping chamber awaits once again with its blankets, coals, and familiar faces. But before you leave the highest watch post completely, you take one final look. The city glimmers beneath moonlight. The stars stretch endlessly overhead. The watchman remains at his station, small against the vast sky, yet absolutely essential. And in that moment, you understand that sleeping in a medieval guard tower meant living between two worlds, the crowded city below and the immense night above. You leave the highest platform behind and descend once more into the heart of the tower. The staircase feels almost welcoming now. Hours ago, it seemed steep and unfamiliar. Now every turn feels recognizable. The smooth places worn by countless boots, the slight draft near one landing, the faint echo that appears halfway down. You know the tower better, and the tower, in its own silent way, seems to know you. The sleeping chamber remains quiet. A few guards rest beneath blankets. Others wait for their next shift. The brazier has nearly exhausted itself, producing more glow than heat. Outside, the sky is clear completely. The storm already feels distant. You settle near a narrow window and look out across the city. The rooftops shimmer beneath moonlight. The air feels cool, pleasantly cool, at least tonight. Not every season would be so forgiving. You've been thinking about how dramatically this tower must change throughout the year. The structure itself remains the same. The experience does not. A summer night would feel entirely different. So would a winter one. The stone walls surrounding you provide an important clue. Touch them now and they feel cool beneath your fingers. During a hot spell, that coolness might feel wonderful. During a freezing January night, it would feel considerably less charming. The tower offers no single personality. It changes with the seasons. Every watchman learns that lesson quickly, and the older guard sitting nearby rubs his hands together out of habit. The gesture seems almost unconscious. You imagine him performing the same motion during colder months, except with much greater urgency. The thought makes you smile. Some parts of tower life become easier to imagine than others. Summer likely brought its own difficulties. Heat, stale air, new daylight hours. The upper platforms would remain exposed beneath the sun for much of the day. Stone absorbs warmth efficiently and releases it slowly. A chamber that feels cool at midnight might have felt rather different earlier. You glance upward towards the ceiling. Darkened beams stretch overhead. Tiny imperfections mark the wood. A patch near one corner suggests repairs completed long ago. The tower has survived many seasons, many generations, many changing weather patterns. The men who served here adapted because they had little choice. A watchman cannot postpone winter. He cannot negotiate with summer. He simply learns to live with both. One guard nearby removes a cloak and folds it carefully. Tonight the garment feels unnecessary indoors. A few months from now, it might remain wrapped around his shoulders even while sleeping. The difference matters. Small changes in temperature influence everything. Mood, comfort, endurance. You notice a polished section of bench near the wall. Years of use have smoothed the wood until it shines faintly in the lantern light. Generations of guards sat there during rainy evenings, cold mornings, and warm summer nights. The bench remembers them all, at least in a physical sense. The people themselves have vanished. Their routines remain. The seasons would also affect the city below during winter. Darkness arrives earlier. During summer, dawn comes quickly. The length of a night's watch never feels quite the same when the sun changes its schedule. The men serving here understood that reality intimately. Some nights seemed endless. Others disappeared surprisingly fast. The answer often depended upon the season. You lean against the window opening. Cool air. Cool air brushes your face. The scent outside has changed since the rain ended. Damp earth remains noticeable, but now you also detect traces of gardens, wood smoke, and distant fields beyond the walls. The city feels alive even while sleeping. A faint scratching sound catches your attention. You glance upward. A pigeon has apparently claimed part of the tower as its home. The bird shifts somewhere above the ceiling beams, then settles again. Nobody reacts. Clearly, this visitor is familiar. It occurs to you that towers attracted more than guards. Birds, insects, and other creatures often found shelter in such structures. The watchman likely knew every feathered resident by reputation. Some probably appreciated them, others almost certainly did not. A complaint about birds would not be difficult to imagine. The lantern light flickers softly. One sleeping guard turns over and pulls a blanket closer. Another sits up briefly, drinks from a cup, and immediately returns to sleep. The room functions according to rhythms established long before your arrival. Everything feels practiced, natural. Seasonal changes probably influence sleeping arrangements as well. During colder periods, people naturally gathered closer to available heat. During warmer weather, any source of fresh air became valuable. You can almost picture the contrast. Winter encouraging proximity, summer encouraging distance. The same chamber, different priorities. The city clock bell sounds faintly across the rooftops. One more note. Then silence. Time continues moving forward. The deepest part of night is beginning to pass. You realize that fatigue now touches everyone in the tower. Even the alert guards speak more quietly. Movements become slower. Conversations grow shorter. The season may shape condition. The hour shapes people. A narrow crack in the wall catches your attention. Tiny repairs surround it. Someone long ago noticed the damage and fixed it before it worsened. That small repair says something meaningful. The tower required constant care. Just like the guards, nothing maintained itself. Not walls, not equipment, not bodies. The work never truly ended. Outside, a faint breeze crosses the city. Inside, the lantern continues burning. The guards continue sleeping when possible, and the tower continues carrying them through another night, just as it carried countless others through winters, summers, storms, and clear skies. The details changed, the rhythm remained. A watch completed, a few hours of rest, another climb up the stairs, another glance across sleeping rooftops. Season after season, year after year, the tower endured, and so did the people who called it their workplace, their shelter, and for many long nights, their temporary home. The bell's distant note fades into silence. For a while, nobody moves. The sleeping chamber exists in a strange balance between rest and responsibility. A few guards sleep deeply. Others linger in that uncertain state between wakefulness and dreams. The lantern continues its patient struggle against darkness. You sit quietly and observe. After spending so many hours inside the tower, subtle differences begin to emerge. Not all guards live exactly the same life. At first glance, everyone appears similar. The same walls, the same stairs, the same long nights, yet small distinctions reveal themselves if you pay attention. One guard sleeps on a mattress, positioned slightly away from the others. Another keeps personal belongings inside a sturdier chest. A third receives updates from arriving messengers before anyone else hears them. The differences are modest, but they exist. Every organization develops layers. The tower is no exception. A watchman descends the staircase carrying a lantern. Several men acknowledge him immediately. Their reactions suggest familiarity, perhaps even respect. He speaks briefly with another guard before examining a roster hanging near the doorway. The exchange is routine. Still, it hints at responsibility. Not everyone carries the same Gs. Not everyone answers to the same expectations. You glance toward the roster. The parchment hangs from a wooden peg. Names and assignments fill its surface. The ink appears faded in places, but the purpose remains clear. Someone organizes these shifts. Someone decides who stands where. Someone keeps the system moving. The tower may appear simple from outside, yet a surprising amount of coordination takes place within its walls. The guard reviewing the roster eventually nods and continues upstairs. His departure leaves the room quiet once more. You find yourself thinking about comfort, or rather, the varying degrees of comfort available to different people. A man with greater authority might possess a slightly better sleeping arrangement. Another might enjoy a warmer position near a fire. Small privileges often matter more than grand luxuries in places like this. A softer blanket, a preferred sleeping spot, fewer midnight interruption. The rewards of status can be surprisingly practical. You notice that one bench near the wall seems especially popular. Guards repeatedly choose it when resting between duties. The reason becomes obvious after a few moments. The location avoids drafts. Simple, effective, highly desirable. Some advantages require no official recognition. Everyone in the tower understands the value immediately. A worn groove in the floor nearby suggests generations reach the same conclusion. Human beings rarely ignore comfort when they discover it. The room smells faintly of damp wood and cooling ash. The brazier has nearly surrendered its final warmth. One guard extends a hand toward the remaining glow anyway, hopeful despite the evidence. The gesture feels familiar. Optimism often survives longer than reason. You suspect medieval watchmen understood this perfectly. Near the staircase, a pair of boots sits neatly beside a folded cloak. Their owner clearly intends to reclaim them quickly. Nearby rests a second pair in considerably rougher condition. The contrast catches your attention, not dramatic, just noticeable. Some equipment has seen harder service than others. The same is true of the people using it. Years leave marks on leather, on stone, on faces. A younger guard enters carrying a small bundle beneath one arm. He looks tired but energetic in the way only younger people can manage. One of the older watchmen glances at him and shakes his head with faint amusement. No words are exchanged. None are necessary. The moment feels timeless. Every generation eventually becomes convinced the next generation behaves differently. Every generation is probably correct. At least a little. The younger guard settles near the wall and begins organizing his belongings with great care. The older watchman watches for a moment before returning to his blanket. Experience recognizes enthusiasm immediately. The answer to whether rank always translated into noticeably better sleeping conditions becomes difficult to pin down. Some towns maintained strict distinctions, others appear to have been less formal. The surviving traces vary from place to place. Yet human behavior provides clues. People tend to create hierarchies wherever they gather. The tower seems unlikely to be an exception. You listen to the breathing of sleeping guards. The sound rises and falls softly through the chamber. Despite differences in responsibility, everyone shares certain realities. Fatigue pulls you hours. The staircase demands equal effort from every pair of legs. The wind shows little respect for rank. The weather treats everyone with impressive fairness. A tiny carving catches your attention on one of the wooden beams overhead. Perhaps a set of initials. Perhaps a simple mark left by someone centuries ago. Nobody knows for certain. The person who made it never explained. Still, the mark remains. A small reminder that individuals passed through these spaces, not anonymous figures. People, each carrying private concerns and ambitions invisible to the historical record. One airman may have dreamed of advancement. Another may have counted the days until retirement. A third may simply have hoped for a quiet shift and uninterrupted sleep. Some aspirations remain refreshingly straightforward. The lantern burns lower. Its light softens the room. The younger guard eventually lies down. The older watchman shifts slightly to make space. No discussion takes place. The arrangement seems understood. Life in shared quarters encourages practical cooperation. The city beyond the walls remains silent beneath moonlight. Inside the tower, the subtle layers of authority and experience continue shaping daily life. Yet as the night deepens and exhaustion settles over everyone, those distinctions become less important. A tired watchman is still a tired watchman. A sleeping guard is still a sleeping guard. The blankets look equally rough. The mattresses look equally lumpy. And dawn, when it finally arrives, will wake them all. For now, the tower gathers them together beneath the same roof, surrounded by the same stone walls, sharing the same long journey through the final hours of darkness. The night is beginning to change, not dramatically, not yet, But you can feel it. The darkness no longer seems endless. Somewhere beyond the horizon, dawn is slowly preparing its arrival. The city remains asleep, though the deepest part of night has already passed. Inside the tower, life continues according to familiar routines. Agard descends the staircase carrying a lantern. Another climbs past him. Neither stops for long. The exchange resembles countless others that have taken place within these walls. Brief words, a nod, then onward. Yet tonight something different happens. A visitor arrives. The sound reaches you first. Footsteps, not the measured rhythm of a watchman. Something quicker, more purposeful. The guards notice immediately. A lantern appears near the entrance below. Voices follow. Then the sound of someone climbing the stairs. You watch several men straighten slightly, not alarmed, simply attentive. The newcomer reaches the chamber carrying a sealed message case. A messenger. His cloak bears traces of mud from the roads outside the city. His boots look damp. His breathing suggests recent exertion. The tower suddenly feels busier. A quiet room can change character very quickly when fresh information arrives. The messenger exchanges a few words with the senior watchman present. The conversation remains brief and practical. Whatever message he carries will continue elsewhere soon enough. Still, his arrival breaks the rhythm of the night. For a few minutes, everyone becomes more awake, more alert, more interested. Human beings have always been curious creatures. News travels poorly through closed eyes. You notice several sleeping guards stirring slightly, not fully awake, just aware that something unusual has happened. The messenger removes a glove and warms his hands briefly near the fading brazier. The gesture reveals another truth. Travel at night is rarely comfortable. A journey that sounds exciting in stories often feels considerably less glamorous in practice. Cold air, dark roads, new distances, mud whenever the weather becomes unfriendly. The messenger appears familiar with all of them. Across medieval Europe, towers often served as points of communication as well as observation. Messages moved through gates, walls, and defensive networks alongside people and supplies. A watchman might spend most of his night looking outward, only to find the most important development arriving from a staircase behind him. Life enjoys irony. The messenger eventually continues upward. You hear his footsteps fade toward higher levels. Then the tower settles once more, but not completely. The interruption has changed the atmosphere. Several guards now sit awake. A conversation begins near the wall. Quiet, curious, speculative. Nobody knows exactly what the message contains, and because nobody knows, everyone develops theories. Some traditions never disappear. One man suspects administrative business. Another suggests news from a neighboring town. A third offers a possibility that sounds increasingly dramatic with each retelling. The conversation remains friendly. The guesses remain harmless. Yet the scene feels remarkably familiar. People discussing incomplete information is hardly a modern invention. The lantern light dances across their faces as they talk. One watchman eventually laughs and shakes his head. Perhaps he has heard similar rumors before. Perhaps he simply enjoys watching speculation unfold. Either explanation feels plausible. You lean back against the wall and listen. The smell of damp cloak still lingers in the room. Rainwater from earlier remains trapped in leather boots and heavy wool. The scent mixes with smoke, oil, and stone. The tower has developed its own atmosphere. Distinct, recognizable, almost comforting. A narrow opening near the ceiling admits a cool breeze. It carries sounds from the city below. A cartwheel rattles somewhere in the distance. An unusual noise at this hour. Perhaps someone beginning work early. Perhaps someone arriving late. Night and morning often overlap more than people realize. The conversation near the wall gradually fades. One guard returns to sleep. Another prepares for duty. The messenger does not reappear. Whatever business brought him here has moved elsewhere. The interruption becomes another memory, another small event in a long night. You notice a wooden chest positioned beneath the window. Scratches cover its surface. Some are deep, others barely visible. Years of use have accumulated there. The chest likely stored dozens of different objects over time. Documents, equipment, supplies, personal belongings. The people changed. The furniture remained. There's more history than anyone expects. A watchman seated nearby absent-mindedly traces a mark carved into the wood. He has probably seen it hundreds of times. The gesture feels unconscious. Familiarity often expresses itself through touch. The city remains quiet. The sky remains dark. Yet something subtle has shifted. The silence now feels lighter, less heavy. The hours immediately before dawn possess a character all their own. You can sense the night losing strength. The guards seem aware of it as well. Their movements become slightly more purposeful. Their attention sharpened. Morning may still be distant, but it is no longer unimaginable. The tower continues receiving occasional visitors. Not every night, certainly. Yet over years, countless people must have climbed these stairs. Messengers, officials, inspectors, travellers with urgent information, perhaps even the occasional person who simply became lost. The tower connected many worlds. The sleeping city below, the countryside beyond the walls, the civic authorities managing daily life, the watchman standing between them all. For now, however, the visitor is gone. The chamber grows quiet once more. The lantern burns steadily. The guards return to familiar routines, and you remain among them, listening to the fading sounds of conversation while the final stretch of darkness slowly unfolds beyond the tower walls. The darkness is no longer complete. You notice it first at the window. Not light exactly, just a subtle change. The black sky beyond the city has softened into deep blue. The stars remain visible, yet some appear fainter than before. Dawn is still distant, but it has begun its quiet approach. The tower seems aware of it. The guards certainly are. Something changes during the final hours before sunrise. Fatigue settles deeper into the body. The excitement of the evening has long disappeared. The middle hours of the night have passed. What remains is a slow test of patience and endurance. You sit near the narrow window and watch the city below. Nothing dramatic happens. That is precisely the challenge. The final watch rarely rewards effort with excitement. Instead, it demands concentration when concentration becomes most difficult. A guard seated nearby rubs his eyes. Another stretches his neck carefully. A third stares into the lantern flame for several moments before standing and beginning another climb toward the upper platform. Nobody complains, at least not aloud, yet their movements reveal everything. The night has been long. The staircase echoes softly as another shift change takes place. You have heard these sounds many times already. Footsteps ascending, footsteps descending, a brief exchange of words. The pattern repeats so often that it almost becomes comforting. Like waves against a shore, the tower depends upon repetition. Every worn stair beneath your feet proves it. The stone in the center of each step has become slightly smoother than the edges. Thousands of journeys created those shallow curves. Men carrying lanterns, men carrying weapons, men carrying exhaustion. The staircase remembers them all. A cool draft brushes your face. The air smells different now. The damp scent of midnight has faded. In its place comes something fresher, something cleaner. Morning has a smell. Not an obvious one, a subtle one. The scent of cooling earth preparing for daylight. The scent of air beginning to move again. One of the sleeping guards wakes without assistance. He opens his eyes, sits upright, and immediately looks toward the window. You suspect this happens often. People who live by schedules eventually develop remarkable internal clocks. The guard pulls on his boots and reaches for his cloak. The motions require no thought. He has performed them hundreds of times, perhaps thousands. A small wooden cup tips over nearby as he stands. The noise is surprisingly loud in the quiet chamber. Another guard grumbles from beneath a blanket but does not wake completely. The moment feels wonderfully ordinary. No great historical event, no important announcement, just tired people sharing limited space. The lantern near the wall burns weakly now. Its job is nearly finished. Soon daylight will take over. The approaching dawn changes behavior throughout the tower. Guards who seemed sluggish an hour ago begin moving with greater purpose. Their shift is almost complete. Sleep feels closer. Breakfast feels closer. The entire city stands on the edge of waking. You climb toward the upper platform one final time. The stairs seem steeper than before. Perhaps they are not. Perhaps you are simply tired. By the time you emerge into the open air, the horizon has brightened slightly. The change remains subtle. A thin grey band stretches beyond distant fields. The watchman stationed here notices it immediately. Of course he does. Watching horizons is part of his profession. The wind has calmed. The city below appears peaceful. A few chimney fires begin producing fresh smoke. Very few, just enough to signal that someone has started the day early. Bakers perhaps, workers preparing for travel, people whose responsibilities begin before sunrise. The watchman rests both hands on the parapet. For a moment he simply looks. No movement, no threat, no alarm. The approaching morning. You imagine how many dawns he has witnessed from this position. Hundreds, maybe more. The view changes with seasons and weather, yet certain elements remain constant. The rooftops, the walls, the gradual return of light. The countryside beyond the city remains quiet. Fields stretch toward the horizon. Trees stand motionless. Roads appear empty. The world feels suspended, balanced between night and day. A bird calls somewhere below. The sound seems surprisingly loud. Then another answers. The first voices of morning have arrived. The watchman smiles faintly, only briefly, yet you notice, after a long night, small signs of daylight carry unusual power. You remain beside this parapet while the sky slowly brightens. The stars continue disappearing, not dramatically, simply faint. The city begins revealing details hidden during darkness. Roof lines sharpen. Towers become easier to distinguish. Streets emerge from shadow. The transformation feels gentle, almost respectful. No sudden change, just gradual certainty replacing uncertainty. Behind you, another guard arrives to assist with the final watch. The exchange between them is brief. They no longer need many words. Experience has simplified communication. A nod, a glance, an understanding. The tower itself seems quieter now. Perhaps because the hardest hours are ending. Perhaps because everyone senses that rest lies just ahead. You descend once more. The sleeping chamber feels different than before. Blankets are being folded. Equipment is being gathered. Men who spent the night half asleep now move with clearer purpose. Morning preparations have begun. The room smells of wool, leather, lantern oil, and tiredness. A very specific combination, one that belongs entirely to places like this. You sit for a final moment near the dying brazier. The coals have nearly surrendered. The lantern has nearly finished its work. The night has nearly ended. And as you watch the guards preparing for another day, you realize something important. The final watch was never really about danger. It was about endurance, about remaining alert when every instinct encouraged rest, about finishing the task, about carrying responsibility all the way to sunrise. The tower asks for that effort every night, and every morning, the surviving watchmen hand the city safely back to the daylight. The first true light of morning arrives quietly, not with fanfare, not with sudden brilliance. It simply appears. A pale glow spreads across the horizon beyond the city walls. The deep blue of night softens into lighter shades. Rooftops emerge more clearly. Chimneys, streets, and church towers gradually reclaim their shapes from darkness. You stand near the upper platform and watch the transformation unfold. The watchman beside you has seen this countless times. Even so, he looks. Everyone looks. Dawn has a way of commanding attention. The city below begins to stir. A chimney releases a fresh stream of smoke. Then another. Somewhere a door opens. Somewhere a cart wheel rolls across stone. The sounds are faint at first, but they grow steadily stronger. The sleeping city is waking. The tower has carried its responsibilities through another night. Now the burden slowly passes elsewhere. The watchman beside you stretches and exhales deeply. The gesture contains equal parts relief and exhaustion. His work is nearly finished, at least for now. No occupation connected to city defense ever truly ends. It simply changes hands. The morning shift arrives. The evening shift departs. The cycle continues. You descend toward the sleeping chamber one final time. The room feels completely different from the place you entered hours ago. Blankets are folded. Equipment is gathered. Lanterns are extinguished one by one. The smell of smoke remains, but daylight has begun replacing artificial light. Sunlight enters through narrow openings and falls across the floor in pale golden bands. The effect is beautiful. Simple, quiet. One guard carefully rolls a blanket before placing it beside a wall. Another secures a sword belt. A third yawns so broadly that several companions laugh. The mood has changed. People no longer wait for dawn. They have reached it. The tower seems to relax. Not physically, of course. Yet the atmosphere feels lighter. The tension carried through the darkness slowly dissolves. You notice details that seemed invisible at night. Marks in the stone, scratches on benches, tiny repairs completed years earlier. Daylight reveals everything patiently. Nothing is hidden now. The room smells different too. Morning air drifts through the windows. Freshness replaces some of the heavier scents that lingered during darkness. Damp wool still hangs nearby, but it no longer dominates the chamber. The city is breathing again. A pair of guards exchange a few words before heading toward the stairs. Their conversation concerns food. After a night like this, the subject feels entirely reasonable. People have been discussing breakfast after difficult shifts for a very long time. Some traditions deserve respect. You move toward a narrow window. Outside, sunlight now touches the highest rooftops. The city walls glow faintly. Birds cross the sky in quick arcs. The roads beyond the gates become visible once more. Everything appears ordinary. That may be the greatest success of the tower. Most nights end without drama. No attack, no fire, no alarm. Just another peaceful sunrise. The guards rarely receive praise for that outcome. Yet their quiet work helps make it possible. The smooth staircases tell part of the story. The worn benches tell another. The polished handles of doors, the repaired cloaks, the tired faces, and the folded blankets all speak in their own way. People lived here, worked here, slept here, not comfortably by modern standards, not continuously, not privately, yet they slept. They adapted to cold stone walls, interrupted rest, changing weather, and long hours of vigilance. Human beings are remarkably adaptable creatures. The tower proves it. One older watchman pauses near the doorway before leaving. His hand brushes the wall briefly as he passes. Perhaps he does it every morning. Perhaps only today. There is no way to know. Oh, the gesture lasts less than a second. Then he is gone, yet somehow it feels meaningful. The tower has been part of his life, just as it was part of countless other lives. The city grows louder now. Merchants begin moving through the streets. Animals wake. Voices appear from nearby buildings. The daytime world returns steadily. Night retreats. The watchmen who spend hours protecting the sleeping city can finally rest. Some will return home. Others may sleep nearby before another shift awaits them. Their duties continue, just not at this moment. You take one final look around the chamber. The mattresses, the benches, the lantern hooks, the stairway winding upward. None of it appears grand. None of it appears heroic. Yet to miss, these ordinary things reveal an extraordinary truth about daily life in the medieval world. History is not made only of kings, battles, and famous events. It is also made of tired people climbing stairs, of guards sharing blankets, of meals eaten between shifts, of quiet conversations beside fading coals, of men finding sleep wherever duty allowed. And so, as sunlight spreads across the city and the tower settles into daytime stillness, you leave behind the watchmen and their long night. You carry with you the sounds of footsteps on stone, the smell of wool and lantern oil, the sight of moonlit rooftops, the feeling of cold air on a high platform, and perhaps most of all, a deeper appreciation for the ordinary people who spent centuries balancing vigilance and rest above the sleeping streets below. The morning continues to brighten, the city fully awakens, the tower stands exactly where it always has, watching patiently over rooftops and roads, just as it watched yesterday and just as it will watch tomorrow. Now the night is finished, the watch is over, and at last it is time to rest. As the city begins another day, you allow the sounds of morning to drift farther away. The footsteps become softer, the voices become more distant, even the bells seem gentler now. Sunlight warms the stone walls that felt so cold during the night, and the tower settles into a calm silence after hours of quiet duty. Imagine those watchmen finally stretching out beneath simple blankets. Their responsibilities have passed to others. The roads are visible again. The gates are open. The uncertainty carried by darkness has faded into the clarity of daylight. The city hums softly beyond the walls. A baker prepares bread. A merchant opens a stall. A cart rattles along a familiar street. Life continues, steady, predictable, comforting, and as you drift away from the tower in your thoughts, the stone staircases become still. The lantern flames have been extinguished. The parapets stand empty beneath the morning sky. Only the memory remained, the memory of long watches, cold winds, shared quarters, and brief moments of sleep gathered between duties. A simple life in many ways. A difficult one too, yet within those ancient walls, people found friendship, routine, purpose, and rest whenever they could. The tower grows quieter, the city grows brighter, and the story gently fades with the rising sun. Sleep well,